Okay. Says we're live. All right, looks like we're live. Okay. Guys in the chat, let me know if everything is looking and sounding okay. Alrighty. So, welcome everyone. This is the Andres Restart podcast, I guess. Today, no guests. Tried to have a guest, couldn't have a guest. Basically, I forgot it was Halloween and most people are busy. So, no one tonight but myself. Probably going to be a bit of a, less populated show, right? Because people are busy. It's holiday. We want a little bit of a break. People forget. It just kind of works. But regardless, I didn't want to go on that long of a podcast break. And I wanted to do this today. I want to talk about a couple of things. I want to get the show started. We are working on some changes for the channel. And I'm excited about those changes. They're not going to be necessarily like dramatic changes for you guys per se, but just like subtle changes that I think will be overall better for me that could, it'll be good for the channel. Like there's some equipment stuff I'm working on that'll be, you won't notice it necessarily, but they'll kind of make things a little bit easier for me. So that's coming in the works. I am maybe planning to do like some shorts in conjunction with the videos, but things have been challenging right now because of work and just really having the timing to do everything. Honestly, it's been very hard. So we're working on things. Don't want to make any promises, but changes and adjustments are coming. So yeah, that all said, tonight what we're talking about, given this is a Nintendo show, I guess it'll be more of a Q&A than a podcast since it's just me, but we're gonna be talking about The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, as we usually do. And we're also be talking about Bayonetta 3 and different things surrounding that. So specifically for Tears of the Kingdom, I think I'll say that for perhaps the second half of the discussion as more people roll in. I don't know, I might go back and forth. But basically, the plan is to kind of talk about what changes Tears of the Kingdom could have that will make it feel like more of a proper sequel. Now, I made a video about this on Saturday. I noticed some people construing that to mean that I'm not excited for the game, that I think it doesn't feel like a proper sequel, that I think it looks just like DLC. I'm not saying that, right? But what I am saying is that what they've shown so far can be construed that way. There is an argument to be made that not that much new has been shown. I mean, they've only shown us 3 different 90-second trailers, and within those 3 90-second trailers, not that much gameplay, and a big chunk of it is in the same place we played last time. So there's definitely an argument to be made that there hasn't been that much new shown off. And when I say that, I'm not trying to say that I don't think there will be more new things. I actually believe there will be, but we haven't seen those yet. So at this point, with what we've seen so far, it doesn't feel like they show enough to where it feels like a full-on new game. So that kind of brings me to the topic of what I'm focusing on right now, which is what changes could they be bringing that will finally make it feel like a proper sequel. So I want to kind of go more in on that idea, that topic. We'll be talking about that tonight. I'm sure you guys have some ideas as well. So there'll be a back and forth between me and you guys in chat. But we're also going to talk about Bayonetta 3. I would like to have a little bit of a post-controversy discussion, sort of wrapping that up there, seeing what you guys think, kind of having more of a give and take, because during this whole 2-week period has been the controversy, haven't really done any live streams where I've been able to talk about this situation with you guys. So I kind of want to do a little bit of that give and take, but then also talk a little bit about how people are complaining about the performance and kind of give you some of my impressions of the game so far. Full disclaimer, I've only just played just a little bit today. But I have played a little bit of it. I have gotten started. I'm actually playing through Bayonetta 1 right now, and then once I beat Bayonetta 1, I'll play Bayonetta 2, and then I'll play Bayonetta 3 to completion. But I have started Bayonetta 3. I have seen how it looks and plays, and I'm actually impressed. So we're going to be talking about that all tonight. But with that all said, guys, like this stream, helps out, share it out to those you think will be interested as well. If you haven't done so before, please consider subscribing. That would be lovely. But yeah, let's check in the chat and let's get the show started. Let's see here. Megaton Menace added me early on. Bayonetta 3 was so good. I think it's the best of the trilogy. Are you going to talk about endgame spoilers and the potential future of the series? No. Not going to talk about spoilers tonight. As I just said, I've only just started the game. I've just gotten a taste of it, and I think it's great. I really do like what I've seen so far. And there's definitely some interesting story things happening right now. I have heard that people have some grievances with the story. I haven't gone through the entire game, so I can't really speak on that. But I'll say this in reference to the future of Bayonetta. My impression is this version of Bayonetta, this third installment, will be the best selling. Will it be significant? That's hard to say. We did see that like sales were up like 4% over Bayonetta 2, the Switch release of Bayonetta 2 in the UK, which is not a significant leap, but that is also the UK and not necessarily Nintendo's best market. So we'll see. But either way, that's still an improvement, right? That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing to see an improvement there. But we'll have to see how things sort of differ in the other regions and as time continues on, like how the game will rank in terms of sales. From a critical acclaim perspective, it's strong. At last I heard it was an 89 or an 88 on Metacritic, which is really good. It's one of the highest rated games of the year. It's quality stuff, and from what I've played so far, feels like quality stuff. So the point I'm getting at here when I sort of think on the future of the series, when I did play Bayonetta 3, kind of like the vibe I got is like, it's like, hey, look, this is Bayonetta. Like, there's definitely like, hey, this is this character. There are certain tropes and ideas, motifs for this character. There's a certain vibe she has. She's a hero in a way. She's a warrior, and she's cool. And she has a fandom. And I think that fandom's going to get a little bit bigger this time around. So when you ask me what do I think of this, of the potential future of the series, I think it's bright. I think this is going to be a series that will continue on. This is not the end. This is just the next installment, and there will be another one. I don't know how long that will be, but I have a hard time believing that there won't be another Bayonetta. It seems like it should be a consistent series. So we'll see what happens, but definitely I think it's a promising future. Of course, I haven't played through the game. Maybe Bayonetta dies and that's it. It's just meant to be a trilogy and they're going to move on to something else. Possible, right? But this sort of like gameplay style, this kind of action game, they're gonna continue with that, I believe. Paul Dunn. I was gonna watch the World Series, but it got rained out. Thankfully, there is the podcast, so I can still watch something entertaining. Go Astros. Well, I'm glad I can give you something entertaining to watch. I'm not much of a baseball guy myself. Didn't even realize that the World Series is happening. That's how out of it I am. It's not that I don't like sports. I've probably mentioned several times here on the show that I love basketball. I paid attention to basketball. I did sort of watch a football game yesterday, not by choice, but I saw Dolphins play yesterday, so I'm no. I mean, I just if I hear something from my family or friends when we're talking about football or baseball, I'll be like, oh yeah, okay, neat. But really, I just follow basketball when it comes to like watching sports. Playing different beast altogether. I love playing pretty much every sport except for tackle football, just because I don't like getting concussions. Anyways, Megaton Menace added me again earlier on. I love Bayonetta 3. I think it's the best in the series. Looking forward to hearing your opinions on it. We're going to talk spoilers. Again, I'll just clarify for anyone concerned, there will be no Bayonetta 3 spoilers here. We're just going to talk about the Bayonetta 3 situation. We're going to talk about my early impressions of the game, but that's pretty much it. We're not going to be going into story spoilers at all. Hello there, Charles Riddell. Hello there, Rescue Squad Culp. Hello there, Super Chris. Having Hope 5. Hello, Jaden Drysdale. Hello there. Joy CJ, you've missed me? I'm glad you've missed me. I've missed you all as well. I'm glad to at least be having a bit of a a little bit of a give and take conversation with you guys for this live stream. Mike Odyssey, hello. Awesome, but I'm glad you're able to tune in for a little bit. Thanks, man. By the way, Mike Odyssey is going to come onto the show in the future, by the way, guys. So Mike Odyssey, he has his own YouTube channel, covers Nintendo. So definitely check him out. You may have also seen him on Nintendo Prime. Cool dude. Definitely check out his channel. Speaking of cool YouTubers, there's Monster Maze. What's up, Don? How are you? Check out Monster Maze's channel as well. An awesome, awesome Zelda channel. Yes, Super Chris, I do have a Heat jersey. I need to get a new one. Not that I have any problems with my current one, but I want to get maybe like a Jimmy Butler or a Tyler Herro jersey, something a little bit more modern. Guy you don't know. Yep, podcast is back. Thanks for coming in. Joseph Licavoli, hello there. Yes, the podcast is back. All right. As I said, tonight, you know, more of a chill thing, a little of a warm-up. I understand it's Halloween. Some people are busy. More people are going to watch this after the fact. But let's talk about the Bayonetta situation a little bit, and we'll move on to Zelda afterwards, okay? So, by the way, everyone, just again, let me know if everything looks and sounds okay, all right? I just didn't hear anyone in the chat on it, so I just want to double-check everything is fine, I believe. I mean, from my end, everything seems fine. I'm using a slightly different microphone setup. Also a temporary thing, but, you know, yeah. Anyway. Right, okay. So, we're going to talk about Bayonetta 3. And there's honestly a lot to kind of talk about here, right? Because we have the controversy leading up to the release, and then we have the discussions about the game after the fact, right? Like, game is reviewed very, very well, but there have been criticisms. People have critiqued the frame rate. People have critiqued the resolution. People have critiqued the story. So those elements as well. But, you know, despite that, the game is really good. So there's kind of a lot there. And then we also have some information from Deki Kamiya that came out that he's indebted to Nintendo for Bayonetta 3. And that's also interesting. So let me kind of pull up just a little bit of stuff I saw on Twitter, which I think is interesting. So apparently, you know, Platinum pitched Bayonetta 3 right after Scalebound was canceled. So what's interesting about that, Scalebound, if you're not familiar with it, just Google it. Scalebound, one word. It was gonna be this Xbox exclusive, and it was gonna be like this sort of cool. I mean, I thought it was a cool looking game. It was basically a game where you control giant dragons and fought other giant beasts. It was a game about kaijus fighting each other, basically. Maybe not necessarily kaijus per se, but giant monsters fighting each other. And there was going to be like a little bit of a medieval fantasy element to it, but also like a sort of modern twist. But that was kind of this concept that it ended up getting canned. But there was some really cool things from the footage we had seen from the game, like from a technology perspective. And then we take a look at Bayonetta 3, and you see what we're seeing in Bayonetta 3. Like, you see this new Demon Slave mechanic where basically Demon Slave. So Bayonetta summons demons to fight. And she's done this in the previous Bayonetta games, but this time around, with this new Demon Slave mechanic, she actually fully enslaves the demons so they can fight the homunculi. That's like the enemy that we're fighting in the series, in this third game. And basically, she controls them entirely. You can control the giant demons now, and you can have these sort of large-scale monsters fighting each other. And that, it seems those mechanics were carried over from the canned Scalebound project. That's the implication there. And that's some cool stuff. But there's more to it than that, right? Like Nintendo had greenlit the series, even though Bayonetta 2 had not turned a profit on just the Wii U. So that's interesting. But to sum it up, though, Hideki Kamiya is forever indebted to Nintendo because Nintendo has allowed him to push this series and continue to give this series a chance to thrive, even though there's been situations you could argue that maybe it shouldn't have been given that opportunity, right? Because the story here with Bayonetta came out on Xbox and PlayStation, was not considered a success. Was not getting fully funded by Sega. No one else was going to pick up the game. Bayonetta 2 was not going to exist until Nintendo came and funded it. And that was basically the beginning of Bayonetta becoming effectively a Nintendo IP. Not 100% fully, but it is effectively. Like, because Nintendo funds the games, they're going to be on Nintendo systems. And that's just how it's going to be. But Nintendo saved the franchise. And I think there's been like a lot of, like, I guess, vitriol on the internet because there are some hardcore Bayonetta fans from Xbox and PlayStation that hate Nintendo systems or rather not play on Nintendo systems. And so there's been a little bit of that debate over the last few years with Bayonetta 2 existing and now Bayonetta 3. But point is, this is an interesting conversation to have when you factor in a few different things. One, the controversy with Helena Taylor calling for a boycott of this game and claiming that this is such a huge, big, popular series, even though the series has struggled to survive for years. And then there's also this element of fans being upset that Bayonetta is only on Nintendo, and the thing is, if Bayonetta was on other systems, they would, in terms of like a graphical performance perspective, it would probably perform better, yet here it is on the Switch, and we are seeing frame rate and resolution issues, which probably has more to do with just the age of the Switch, and there's more implications for what could be happening in the future. So there's honestly a lot to kind of cover here. And this is kind of one of the challenges with just doing like a podcast by myself because, well, there's not much of it's just me kind of ranting, right? So I want to just take a moment to kind of check in the chat here, and we'll kind of come back to this. Having Hope 5, correct. You can never have too much Zelda. Mike Odyssey. After I finish binging Monster Maze, I'll be super ready to take on Nate on a Zelda debate battle. Yeah, do that. That'll be fun to see. Niche Quick Pops added me. Good to see you back on the podcast. Glad you enjoyed Xenoblade 3. I absolutely did enjoy Xenoblade Chronicles 3. By the way, guys, watch my Xenoblade Chronicles 3 review. No one watched it. Well, some people watched it, but it's just not, I don't know, just didn't really pick up. Maybe because it's a spoiler one, and the timing's off. But yes, there is if you want to hear my full thoughts on Xenoblade Chronicles 3, including my story spoilers and all, there is a 20+ minute video on there. Check it out. It's a good time. But yeah, Joycey J, I agree with you. But Joycey J says, it bugs me to hear people complain on which system the game is on. Should have supported it. Yeah, just, if maybe more people should have just bought Bayonetta initially when it came out on its initial systems. Glad you enjoyed the Xenoblade video, Having Hope 5, very much. But let's continue on with this sort of Bayonetta discussion, right? So let's kind of first go back to the controversy situation. Yeah, Monster Maze, you want to chime in? I'd love to add you. I don't know if you're actually available, but if you want to join in, let me know. I can check Discord real quick. I just assume most people are busy. Yeah. All right, cool. I'm going to give you a call to see if you're available. I don't know.
Bud.
Yo, what's up, man?
I just saw your stream, and I saw you were talking about the whole Bayonetta situation and Zelda, so I was like, well, if you want someone to talk
Yeah.
to and not rant on your own.
Yeah, no, for sure, man. Yeah, I was like, oh man, I want to talk about Zelda with Dawn, but like I know you're in a different time zone, so like if it's like
Yeah.
last minute, I'm like, I should like I feel like I should always ask you like in advance. But yeah, I'm excited to have you on, man.
Yeah, I'm gonna be up for about an hour or so, and then I'm gonna head to bed because I have been working a lot today. But yeah, let me know what you want to talk about, because I do have to say I haven't played Bayonetta, uh, and I'm probably not gonna, because it's not really my thing.
Sure.
But I did follow the whole controversy pretty closely back then, because it's, as
Yeah.
someone who's self-employed, I kind of know how the business works.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. No, no. Well, honestly, I would love your opinion on that for sure. We're only gonna touch on the gameplay stuff, right?
yeah,
So I think that'll be fine. And honestly, I don't even plan on this being like that long of a show. So I think timing works out great. So guys, we've added Monster Maze on in just kind of like unprompted, but definitely check out his channel. I will link it later on. But you can see him in the chat, Monster Maze. Check him out. But yeah, let's
thanks.
just jump into this Bayonetta conversation, right? So
Yeah, sure.
yeah, I definitely want to hear your thoughts on the controversy, because it's interesting because it was quite a kind of like an up and down thing, right? Like first, Helena Taylor comes out and she says what she has to say, right? And a lot of people aren't really knowledgeable on the situation. And it was a very peculiar set of videos. Like she was emotional about it and she was stating some facts that people were questioning. But, it is also a known issue that voice actors are necessarily paid correctly, right? So she makes this claim, people believe it, and then, Hideki Kami is attacked and Platinum Games is attacked. People start canceling their pre-orders. But then, there's debate, and then there's a Bloomberg report, and then Video Games Chronicle corroborates said report. Jason Schreier comes out and says, well, actually, she was paid more than she suggested, right? And then the third installment to the story, where Helena Taylor comes out and tries to defend herself, but actually effectively confirms the story from Bloomberg and Video Games Chronicle. And ultimately, even though her goal was to kind of bring down the series because she felt that they did things that were unethical, it boosted sales, it looks like, from what we've seen on both the eShop and Amazon. So it's kind of crazy how it's all happened, but I just felt like summarizing that for everyone. But what do you kind of make of this whole situation?
Well, I feel like I'm not very outspoken in general, not on Twitter and stuff. I don't cover controversies very quickly, and I still haven't. I haven't really said anything on Twitter about it. But I was one of the first people who came out against friends and be like, actually, we should probably wait for this whole situation, because it's kind of a so I have been self-employed for about 4 years now. I know what it is to be a self, you're your own company.
Yeah.
And that's what most voice actors do, right?
Yeah.
Most of them are freelancers. They may have an agent, or they may choose to go into some sort of organization, but most of them are just freelancers, just doing jobs. And I've seen a lot of people say things like, well, 15K is still not a lot, considering how much the game is going to earn. And I'm like, well, I've done jobs for I'm a freelance animator, I do jobs for all kinds of companies. I've done animations for the barber down the street, but I've also done animations for the Coca-Cola company. And whether or not that product I'm making is going to make millions, or is only going to make I don't know, 1K, it doesn't matter. That's not relevant to me. You are paid for your time, for the time you spent. And as a freelancer, you have the freedom to choose what your hourly wage is going to be, what you ask for,
Yeah.
Which in my case, for instance, is somewhere between $80 and $100 compared, it kind of depends on the business relationship I have with them.
Sure.
If it's a company that regularly asks me for animations, I say like, I'm gonna lower the hourly wage
Yeah,
rate.
because you know you're gonna get consistent work from them, right? Because you know you're gonna get consistent work from them, you can afford to have a slightly lower rate. But if you don't know when you're gonna get work again, you know you're more likely to ask for a higher price because it kind of makes up for the difference of not knowing when you're gonna get work again, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think Miss Taylor kind of counted herself rich prematurely, and she thought that she had it made. And that's just not how it works in the business. I am no Pixar. I'm not going to be able to compete with like the top of the animators, Uh, like if you're a voice actor like Miss Taylor, but also many other voice actors out there, it's your price is usually based on two things: your talent, obviously, but also your name, your brand. You know, if you're gonna have a James Earl Jones voicing one of your characters, you're gonna pay not just for the hours he spent in the booth, you're also paying for the fact that you have James Earl Jones in your in your
Yeah.
booth. You have it automatically boosts the marketing of your product. Same with actors. You can either hire a B-list actor that nobody knows, or you can hire Will Smith, which means more people are going to see it because it's a Will Smith movie, even though the other actor may be as talented, if not more talented than Will Smith.
Yeah,
Uh,
but what's
but
gonna make them more money, right? Like, I
yeah,
think
you're paying for the brand, and if you look at Helena Taylor's, uh, how do you call that? Like her list,
the IMDb,
yeah, the stuff she's done in the past, she really hasn't done that much.
and that's what's shocking, right?
Yeah,
Like if you look at
she's
it, her last work was Bayonetta stuff in 2014. So the implication, based off from what she's told us, is that she's either been doing theater work or no work. Um,
yeah,
so, you know, and it's not. I'm not trying to make like negative judgments against her per se, but like when it comes to asking for a high asking price, in the voice acting world, well, when you're not doing voice acting, what do you expect?
yeah. You gotta have that reputation, you gotta have that history of. And sometimes one character is all it takes. That's true. Sometimes it can lead to that. But come on, Bayonetta is not that big,
And
It's
that's
no.
right, right, and that's why I wanted to bring up the whole element of how Bayonetta 1 underperformed. They weren't going to fund Bayonetta 2. Nintendo came in and saved it. And then for Bayonetta
Yeah,
3, Bayonetta 2 on Wii U still was a loss. They'd only started to make profit with the Bayonetta 2 port on Switch. So it's not like
yeah,
this series has been making oodles of money. It's actually a series with a history of struggling. So when Helena Taylor comes out and says it's a $450 million franchise, by the way, no one's been able to verify that pricing. That seems to be kind of pulled out of thin air.
yeah.
It's just kind of strange that she's asking for people to boycott the series. And regardless of in my personal opinion, right? Like even if it ended up being the case that Platinum Games was dramatically underpaying her, which doesn't seem to
Hmm.
be the case from what I've seen at least. Um,
No, no, definitely not.
But even if they were unethical in that regard, I still wouldn't think it'd be fair to then boycott an entire production that's been in the works for years by hundreds of people. Like, it's not just about getting paid; it's about the series, making money so there can be future projects, so people can maintain their jobs, but also just the art of it, right? Like, if people have been working on a project for years, it's not even just about the money; it's about people enjoying that work. So when you're calling for a boycott that affects hundreds of people because one person didn't like what they were being offered, that seems like a little bit of a tall ask, if in my opinion.
Oh yeah, for sure. And like you said, it's an offer. It's not like she's employed there and she's like structurally underpaid for something. You as a freelancer have the freedom to say, this is what I want, take it or leave it. And if they don't, I think that's kind of what happened in her situation. She counted herself rich because she voices a big character in a big video game franchise, relatively big
Yeah.
video game franchise, and she thought she was gonna, you know, be able to live the entire year off of that one job or something. I don't know exactly what she was thinking, but that's that's generally that's not how it works. And when they declined, perhaps she was thinking she was like invincible in that regard, like I am the voice of Bayonetta and nobody's going to be able to replace me. And then when they did, that's when she was like, I think it was a bit of a, you know, dent in her pride to a certain
Yeah,
extent, because she did come off as a little bit arrogant.
I mean, she
in her
kind of
videos.
attacked. She was a backhanded attack towards the voice actress for I mean, well, the new voice actress for Bayonetta, Jennifer Hale, who, by the way, has a very healthy history on IMDb. She's used for a lot of different games. She's good at what she does. And you know,
Also has done a lot for the business in general.
yeah.
So, yeah. No, I agree. That's just not something you do, especially if it's an offer. And you know, they did not. The negotiations fell flat. That's simple as that. And after that happens, you can either say, all right, I'm going to take the job for this. Because to be honest, $1,000 per hour, that's I would kill to get an animation job for like 15K for 4 days, 4 hours in a booth. I would definitely do that. But, you know, if she has trouble getting by, then she either needs to take on more jobs, either within voice acting or do something on the side like I do. You know, I scrap by doing a little job here, animations here. I have my YouTube channel. You know, that's how I get my like bread on the table.
Right.
And I guess she just did not want to do that. And I'm sure she has her theater stuff too, but I don't know, it just came off as very disingenuous, the whole situation. And I was pretty quick to catch on to that because, you know, because I've been doing this for 4 years, I know when someone is not getting paid well. I know when someone is being exploited. And I did not see that in that situation. So I already told like one of the other Zelda tubers, Nintendo Black Crisis.
Yeah.
I said, people really need to learn to wait until all the facts are on the table, you know?
Yeah.
Because there was nothing back then, no receipts. We did not have the Bloomberg article yet. We had no reaction from Platinum except
Hideki Kamiya freaking out, but that's what he does, you know.
Yeah, he did not respond to the situation very well. But I guess there's also a bit of a language barrier there.
Yeah, he's a weird character, right? He's eccentric, and it doesn't, when you're put under scrutiny, it doesn't go well, right? I think he's just like a weird artist, right? That's what he is. He's a weird artist. But you know, not everyone is okay with just accepting that. People want to hold him accountable. But also, to your point, there's a language barrier, right? Like, he doesn't necessarily... This is more of a Western issue, right? And there's this whole other angle that I don't think people always consider. Helena Taylor may have very well been the voice of Bayonetta for the first and second iterations in English. There are other languages. There are other parts of the world. Yeah. So... and it's not just her that needs to get paid, right? There are different actors per language that need to get paid. And that's just for voice acting, which, by the way, I don't want to say, like... I mean, I just think that's not even necessarily the most important thing of a game, right? Like, I think there should be voice acting. I'm not trying to argue against it, but the money should be going to everything else. The gameplay, the mechanics, things like that. So... the voice acting is just a small piece to the overall puzzle. And when there's multiple languages and multiple characters, and it's not even that big of a series, how much money can you reasonably expect?
Well, that's also why I don't understand why people keep bringing up the fact like, oh, this game is gonna make millions. Yeah, what do you think the investment into the game has been? That's also it has a budget of, let's say the game has a budget of 5 million,
Yeah,
probably more. That's just a number I'm grabbing out of thin air
sure,
myself.
right.
But you have a budget. Part of that goes to development, part of it goes to PR, to marketing, to the like everything, literally everything that encompasses a game's production. So if one voice actor is going to be like, I want 6 figures, and that's going to like eat away at your budget, and you're like, that's literally what happened. Platinum looked at her offer, like what she was expecting, and they said, no, we're not going to pay you that much money, because we don't have that much. And let's be honest, Bayonetta is not a super, like, it's no Xenoblade. It doesn't have like thousands and thousands of voice lines. The fact that she was able to record Bayonetta
Yeah.
1 or 2 in 4 days, half a day, because it was
Yeah.
like 4 days, 4 hours.
It's 20 hours of work, basically, give or take. So Bayonetta 3, from what we've heard, if it's any more, it's like maybe like another session or two, but basically like 24 hours of work, maybe, right? 30 if like we're maxing out here, which is still a part-time position for 1 week, and you're gonna get paid
Yeah.
at least $15,000. And you haven't done anything in terms of voice acting, at least according to IMDb, since 2014. That's one heck of an offer, if you ask me.
And the stuff she
yeah.
has done is mostly background NPCs before that. Like her whole biography is like Cannibal Woman #2, or like like
It's nuts.
it's all NPCs in the background. She only has like 2 lead character roles. One is Bayonetta and the other is some other series. I forgot the name of that. No disrespect to her, because everybody has to start somewhere, and once you
Right.
land a role and you get big with it, hey, that's awesome. But when Platinum says, sorry, that's not inside our budget, you have the chance to say no. And she did. She did say no.
And
then
they
they
offered
found
her
someone else.
True, but I think another interesting thing to kind of just point out, at least according to the Bloomberg report, which Helena Taylor did corroborate,
Mm-hmm.
they offered her, apparently, according to Helena Taylor, so take it with a grain of salt because she's already shown dishonesty, but she said that they offered initially $10,000. And I don't understand the exact numbers, but I'm under the impression that's above the union rate. And still still way more than she was paid initially for the first game. And then they upped it by 5,000. That's a 50% increase. That's like someone who's making 100K and then being offered 150K.
Yeah.
Like it's a lot.
And of course, like, obviously, guys like Chris Pratt, who isn't even a professional voice actor, he's going to get paid a lot more for the Mario movie. But that's, again, like I said before, you're also paying for the brand.
Yeah, it's also not a game, right?
It's also not a game.
The focus
like,
is more on the narrative.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Do you know Sean Chiplock? The guy who voiced Rivali, the Deku Tree, and I think Teba as well.
Yeah.
No, not.
Well,
Teba.
I didn't remember the name, but I know of who you're referring to.
Yeah, he voiced like 3 characters in Breath of the Wild, and I think he said he got somewhere between 3 and 4K, which,
For all of that.
could it be more? Yeah, but like, could it be more? Sure. Like, and his past voicing that he's done before is a lot bigger than Helena Taylor's. Like, is it called biography or disco? I don't know. I forget the word.
Filmography.
I know the Dutch. Yeah, like in English, it's called discover, something like that. I don't know.
I'm like not 100% sure because like games aren't films. But like I don't know. There's like filmography, right, which is kind of like just the history of like films you've worked on.
I know the word in Dutch, but I don't
Oh,
know the word in English. That's why I'm kind of struggling here. But
mm,
you know what I mean. Like
yeah,
his resume. His
sure.
resume is a lot bigger than that of Helena Taylor's. But you know, Breath of the Wild didn't have that many voice lines, and a professional voice act. Like if I have to record a seven-page script, I'm struggling for 2 or 3 days. But you know, if you're a professional voice actor, you can shoot out those lines and it's gonna be good.
You don't even necessarily have to remember them. I think in some cases, like I think you're just handed a script and you read off of the script. There's no memorization. Like I watched an interview of Helena Taylor, talking about her work on Bayonetta. She
Hmm.
wasn't given like a lot of time to research or prepare. She was just kind of like, hey, look, this is the character. Kind of go for like this feel, and she just kind
Yeah,
of like just went at it. Um,
yeah, they often do
yeah,
that to keep it a secret and stuff.
right. But I, from my point is though, is that like there isn't like it isn't like she's doing like a lot of background research for this. And it's I don't mean to take away. Yeah, you know you got to work on your craft, right? You should be paid for your expertise. So it's obvious. I'm not saying she doesn't do work behind the scenes, but the character itself, there wasn't like a lot of like character analysis. Like a lot of actors in films, like we've seen them make great sacrifices, right? Like you look at
Yeah,
like what Christian Bale for Batman, right? Like I think like some of the things he's done, like in terms of like dropping weight and different things, not necessarily just for Batman, but for different roles. And other actors have done crazy stuff like that, or they'll
oh
like
yeah,
just put themselves in circumstances that may even be kind of inhumane, but it's all about researching and matching the role so you can look the part, feel the part, act the part. Um, that's not what Helena Taylor had to go through for Bayonetta. So
no, no, it was a fair offer, and I just don't understand why people are so obsessed by saying like voice actors need to be paid more. And I'm like, okay, yeah, well, based on what? Most of them are freelancers, and they decide what their rate is gonna be. And uh, same with animators. Doesn't matter if you're a freelance animator or a freelance voice actor. You decide how much you want and how much you are worth, and you set those standards based on your talent. And people can either accept, or you bargain with them, or you just let the whole thing go. I've said no to some jobs where they're like, "Can you make this animation 5 minutes for 1K?" I'm like, no, like 5 minutes. That's gonna be at least a week of work for me. And
yeah.
yeah, under normal circumstances, that would be like 2 or 3K. I'm not gonna do this. Uh, sometimes you can already feel that the job is not gonna be for you.
Yeah, and that comes down to each person, right? And it's also a business, right? Like not every production has a good budget. They sometimes are gonna. It may seem shitty, right? But like it also behooves the production with a limited budget to not necessarily offer top dollar all the time, right? And so
Yeah,
it is kind of the onus is on the individual creator or actor to take it upon themselves to decide what they're worth.
yeah.
And it can be tricky for sure. And
Well,
it's
that's why
also
you
like,
become.
go on.
That's why you also choose to become a freelancer, because you have irregular work hours. You have more free time to do whatever you want, and you can spend that time either working on stuff or you can just take a break. I can say right now, I'm not going to do any work for 2 weeks. And if you're employed, you cannot make that decision unless you
Yeah,
sacrifice your holidays and stuff like that. So that's the whole reason why I wanted to be a freelancer, is to have that type of freedom. The only downside is sometimes you just don't have as much work, and YouTube revenue dips down in January, February. I'm gonna take a hit financially, but you know I will recuperate from that across the rest of the year. Like in the span of the rest of the year,
yeah. You gotta
June
budget
is good.
yourself.
Yeah, you work a little extra hard in December. you get all that holiday revenue, and then you're set for, you can take that financial blow. That's just how freelancing has it's how it always has worked. And you don't have that. I feel much worse for those people who are employed, like the horror stories that you hear at Marvel, where the VFX artists are just being crunched into oblivion, making all these effects. They barely get any credit, and they're employed by a company, a VFX company. They're underpaid, overcrunched, and there's nothing they can do. I feel much worse for those types of people than someone like Helena Taylor, who's just too arrogant to recognize that the offer she's asking for is way too much compared to the budget and the popularity of the game. Doesn't mean that, there's not a discussion to be had about possibly paying people more for certain jobs, but I don't know, she just did not feel, it never felt to me like that was the case with her.
Yeah.
And then the figures came out, and lo and behold, what did we see? She actually lied about it, because she said 4K. She definitely said 4K in those videos.
Right, and she made it. She made it sound like it wasn't like a misinterpretation. It was she said I'm paraphrasing, but $4,000 whole production at flat rate. Like she completely ignored the $15,000 she was offered. She was offered $4,000. Yes, she didn't lie about that, but she was offered $4,000 for a cameo appearance, just a handful of hours of work, and they only did that. About that. Right, they only did that out of respect for her, because they wanted her to still be involved with the series. They didn't need her. So after she requested more money, and they gave her a lot more money compared to what they were initially offering, which was initially still above union rates and more than she was paid beforehand by a sizable margin. And she retracted, she rejected even the second offer. About a year later, they came back and offered her $4,000 for maybe just a couple hours of work, just so she could still be involved with the series. And she still said no. And then she turned around and tried to drag the series down with her. Yeah.
That's exactly what happened. I totally forgot about the cameo part. That's where the 4K came from originally. So it's it's not good. It's not good. And it's a shame too, because she basically threw her entire voice acting career in the trash, because nobody's gonna ever want to work with her ever again. And she's made enemies out of other voice actors. I know the guy who, like I said, voiced Rivali. He was very angry about this situation at Helena Taylor, because he felt like it overshadowed real issues in the business.
Yeah, and it kind of takes away credibility sometimes, because people were like, oh, well, we've been through this before, and that was bogus.
Yeah, exactly. And, sometimes you also just have to live with the fact that there is inequality, because it's all based on who you know, in your networking skills. There's so much that decides how much money you're going to make. Part of it is your talent. Like, let's take as an example, like an average band. They can be the most talented band in the world, but nobody's going to pay $50 to see them, because we don't know them yet. They don't have a name yet. They don't have a reputation yet. Whereas, I don't know, Roger Waters or any other big musician can just ask for $100 for a concert ticket. Is it fair? I guess not in a way. But I mean, even Roger Waters had to start somewhere, sometime, and same goes for voice actors. If you made like Troy Baker doesn't have any trouble getting work right now, because he's done so much stuff, and he really made it big with Joel, voicing Joel in The Last of Us and stuff like that. He's been getting jobs after jobs. I can guarantee you that. Whereas Helena Taylor just shot herself in the foot, and now it's,
Yeah. Like her reputation is totally tarnished. Like, I'm very curious if this is going to impact her jobs in the theater as well. Like, I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people wouldn't even know about her situation. in the
Doesn't
video
feel
game
like
industry.
there would be a lot of overlap between those two businesses. Theater feels like, kind of like it's a thing on its own.
Yeah, it's in a whole other world. So
Yeah,
she may still be able to find work in that department. But you know,
I hope so.
I don't know
I hope
though,
so.
because the thing is, it's one of those things where you know how. Okay, you know how like when a company hires somebody, they do their research, right? They look at them up on social media. If a company hires Helena Taylor, it wouldn't be very hard to find out what's going on with her, right?
Well, especially since she still has the videos up on her Twitter.
Right. She's not trying to hide it. Like she's unapologetic about her stance. For
Yeah,
at least
yeah.
from what I've seen, she doesn't think what she's done is wrong at all.
No,
She
she's still digging herself deeper into a
yeah,
hole right now.
and it makes me wonder, right? And I feel like this is definitely like thin ice that I'm walking on here because I don't want to like just start saying, "Oh, she's crazy," but she herself brought into question her own mental health. She said she's been going through some stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm simply saying when you look at what's transpired, right? She inadvertently confirmed the reports that kind of condemned her stance,
Yeah.
and still
Yeah.
doesn't seem to realize it. So I just me being fully honest, I gotta think that maybe she's just in such a bad place right now. Maybe that's why she's doing this, right? Like it might be in part a financial stressor, but it also might be just from an emotional standpoint. She's not even thinking straight. So I don't know what that
Mm.
means. I'm not trying to say she has a mental disorder. I don't know, but I think it's very clear she's not in a good place.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think she has a mental disorder. Could be, of course. I mean, what classifies as a
Right. I
mental
mean,
disorder?
she
I
would
mean,
have. I mean, it's such a even like I think if a doctor were to assess her, mental health is such a challenging subject to sort of because I still think we as a society we don't have a good rap on it yet. So I don't want to diagnose her either. I'm just simply saying I think she's going through some stuff that's definitely affecting her
sure.
perspective.
But the big question in that case is it because of her own destructive behavior, or is it because she really has struggles that, like she's not to blame for it? Because I get by with my freelance work just fine. I've been doing it for 4 years, and I am in a less stressful place than I've ever been. Ever since I started doing freelance, I've been more happy, more healthy than I've ever been. But I also have to work really hard. That's also part of it. You cannot just sit back and relax and just expect to get rich out of like from one job per year. That maybe that's what she was hoping for, and after landing the Bayonetta role, maybe that's what she was kind of counting on.
Yeah.
And then when that didn't happen, her world kind of collapsed in a way. And like I said, maybe she really did think she was going to be able to pay the bills for a whole year by just doing that one voice. Maybe that's somehow she deluded herself into thinking that.
Yeah. It's definitely strange. But let's check in with the chat for a little bit. We'll talk a little bit more Bayonetta and then we can move on. Let's see here. I got a few ads. Josh Coleman, non-video game related, but after finishing Breaking Bad, I just want to say that it was incredible. I think it's the best show ever, up there with my favorites. I will say I like Breaking Bad a lot. I did hear recently that Better Call Saul, I think, finished up. I've seen a few of those seasons too, and I also think that show is great. I agree. Breaking Bad is definitely like one of the better shows out there.
One of the best ever made, probably.
Yeah, and
And
I'm
they
not even
stopped at
into
their-
like drug stuff,
They had
but
the
it's
balls
really good.
to stop when it was at its high point.
That's important. That's a big thing for me. And this does extend to video games because at least when it comes to, it's a little different with video games because sometimes you just want to play the game. But I think when it comes to story, you have to know when to end it.
Yeah.
And when it comes to video games, I think you can still continue the game series, but you gotta have a completely different. You have to reset. I think, but
Yeah.
Stories in general, though, I think, you know, I mean, the thing about stories is that they're supposed to be like, it's like a rise, right? You get to the climax and you have a falling resolution. Like there's certain beats that make a good proper story, and I think after a certain point of kind of doing that repeatedly, you lose what it initially had. So I definitely agree with you. Breaking Bad ended at the perfect time.
Yeah, and they did a great job doing Better Call Saul instead of just continuing the story of Breaking Bad, because you know Better Call Saul takes place around the same time, a little bit before and a little bit after, actually, also.
Yeah.
So it spans across the same timeline, but it just focuses on a different character who we don't see all that much in Breaking Bad. So you're always wondering, so like, oh, well, I wonder what he was doing all this time while they were doing that. And yeah, I don't know. It's I fully agree with you. Like a story, it has to have direction. So either like with games, you can set up your games that you can just constantly reset and it doesn't matter. Like Zelda, for example, you don't have to play every Zelda game to understand the next one. It's
They stand on their own.
Yeah, it still has overarching lore, but that's more of a reward for those who stick by who are really going into that. But everybody can understand the Wind Waker. If you only played the Wind Waker, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's many shows like that. The Walking Dead went on for way too long.
I hate to say it, but I thought it was so cool at first. But once I realized that there wasn't a cure, and the show was kind of just going to be very cyclical for a while, I moved on.
Yeah, it's it's like entering season 12 or 11 or 12 now.
I know my friend Rob from Rule to Review. If you heard me say that, he'd be like, "How could you? The Walking Dead is the best series ever." You know, I thought it was really good at front, and maybe it closes strong, but yeah, I just think the story went on for too long.
Well, sometimes it's also a corporate decision.
Yeah, it's like money.
I don't know if you've seen Lost back in the day.
No.
That was like they had a whole story. Yeah, they had a whole story ready, and that whole story was written for 3 seasons, and then the publishing company said like, no, we need 6, or initially they said 10, and then they managed to talk it down to 6. The show's creators, so they suddenly had to make up the story, like that complete story that they wanted to wrap up in 3 seasons. Suddenly they had to extend that out to 6, and it just became after season 3 you can see the decline. The writers didn't know what to do anymore.
And you know, it's interesting though, sometimes the opposite can happen where a series ends too quickly. I think that the only series that comes to mind is Game of Thrones. If I remember correctly, they were actually offered enough budget and time to extend out the final season for a few more episodes. They chose not to. They wanted to squeeze it into, what was it, 6 episodes or something, and it showed. Because I as much as I thought that I actually kind of liked how they ended things, but I thought how they ended the arc of the White Walkers, I thought that was anticlimactic. And I also thought I don't want to spoil things for everyone, but I also the arc of Daenerys Targaryen.
I think most people know.
Yeah.
Now.
Probably.
It's become so famous at this stage.
But let's just say her downfall was too sudden. Like, yes, I saw it coming. Yes, it was foreshadowed, but she was basically normal, and then 2 episodes later, yeah,
she was crazy.
Right. Like, I think there needed to be a little bit more of a transition. So I think basically if they had a few more episodes, they probably could have done both the things they discussed more smoothly.
I have a very weird relationship to Game of Thrones because I did not see the first 5 seasons.
Oh, really?
Wait, how many seasons were there? 6?
I don't remember. 7 or 8? I'm not sure. I'm gonna look it
7
up.
or 8. I only saw the last season, and that was just because my wife was watching it. She saw it from the very beginning, and
8 seasons.
I was like, I'll just watch it with you, even though
Yeah.
I'm not going to understand anything because I haven't seen all the stuff
Yeah.
before it. And I thought it was awesome because I did not know like the heights it fell from.
Yeah.
So I just saw those White Walkers. I was like, whoa, this is actually pretty cool. Whoa, there's a dragon.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's why I said I have a very weird relationship to it. But now that I heard from other people the context, now that I know how it ties into the other seasons, I'm like, okay, yeah, I get why people were upset.
Yeah. I mean, it's really cool, but I just thought it needed a little bit more time. But let's get back to the chat real quick here.
Yeah.
Josh Coleman, glad you liked the shirt. I am a fan of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. I haven't seen the most recent season, but I'll get to it. Ronnie Fazio, hey man, I'm a little late, but I'm here, and personally I feel like that woman just had an inflated ego. She had no right to say that Jennifer Hale had no right to sign merchandise. Well, I'm a believer in free speech. She can say whatever she wants, but she should be prepared for the repercussions because other people have the right to react. And I do agree. I think it was hurtful. I think it was mean-spirited. And yeah, she was just jealous. I think so. Yeah, and the thing is, like,
it's also part of being a professional
Yeah.
in your craft, like
Yeah.
do you know how many actors almost got the role for a very famous movie and then declined, or it just didn't work?
Something comes up, right? Like that there's
Something comes
Yeah.
up, either or they thought the pay was too low, and then the next for example, like there've been like for Lord of the Rings, Aragorn was supposed to be played by some other guy. I don't remember who.
Really?
Yeah. The casting was already it was this close to Aragorn being a different character, but stuff like that happens. But what they don't do is then turn around and talk shit about them behind their back and be like, oh, I should have gotten the role. They have no right to be Aragorn or whatever. Or, like an actor gets replaced for some reason. Doctor Who always has new actors coming in and out, playing essentially the same character. None of them are going to say, like, they have no right to call themselves the Doctor. And it's like, that only hurts your reputation, and it just makes you seem like a sore loser, and that's what she did. That's what Elena Taylor did.
Yeah. Exactly. I think we just saw some very ugly perspectives of her. She's just, I don't think she's in a good place. I think she let her envy and jealousy, stress, whatever it is, kind of all come to the surface. And it's unfortunate. But, I made a video kind of trying to make the argument that even though Helena Taylor wanted to drag down the series, ironically, she saved the series. She's kind of like been the series hero, which is kind of funny. Like, I don't think she was gonna. I don't think the game was gonna flop, but she helped it. She gave a little bit of a boost. Interestingly,
ironic.
Yeah, it's very ironic. So I guess it's kind of cool. I mean, really, the only one that's really suffering here is her. I think everyone else wins but her, and that's sad.
It's sad, yeah. I hope she finds her way, because I don't hold grudges just to people. Like, oftentimes people want these people to be destroyed, and I don't want to see that. I just hope she learns from the situation.
And that's something else I want to bring up before we move on, actually, is cancel culture, right? Because it's very reactive. It's usually whoever makes the first accusation is the one that gets the support, which I'm not a fan of, right? I think you need to hear both sides, as you brought up earlier. You need to consider the different angles, and sometimes it's not black and white, right? Sometimes both sides can be at fault. But I think a lot of people, they heard her say her things and they're like, oh, you know, a single person is, you know, complaining about a bigger company. All right, let's bring out our pitchforks and torches, and, you know, we're gonna cancel the hell out of them. Never play a game again. Hideki Kamiya should get fired. Blah blah blah. This and that. When in reality that wasn't really the case. And also, Platinum Games I wouldn't consider like to be a big corporation either, right? But, you know, a lot of people made accusations and assumptions and believed things that weren't necessarily true.
It's a very unfortunate situation in the current day, especially with social media. It's just, of course, people have been doing it since the dawn of time, probably, but always the assumptions. That's what always gets me. I'm like, how hard is it to just wait just until everyone has had their say, until all the facts are on the table, and then make your decision, even if it turns out your presumptions were correct. That doesn't mean you have to speak them, make them some sort of truth already, because it's just not fair against you already see it happen now too, with Henry Cavill being is gonna leave The Witcher, you know, and of course, like already people have all kinds of, they know exactly why he quit The Witcher. They already said like, oh, they're ruining the show and he likes the lore a lot and blah blah blah. And like, why are you trying to decide for him why he quit The Witcher? How about just wait until he talks about it at some point? I'm sure he's gonna talk about it because he knows The Witcher has a lot of fans, and he's gonna clarify why he quit. Maybe it's just because he doesn't want to do Superman and The Witcher at the same time. Maybe he wants to give some other actor the choice, or maybe he really does think the writing is not going in the right direction. Fine.
And it could be that, you know, but also that's just a difference of opinions, right? That doesn't necessarily mean one side is right and the other side is wrong either, you know? Now, I don't know a lot about the topic, so, you know, I don't want to speak on it too much, but I did hear about it. So I guess we'll see. But I mean, it's kind of something we do on the channel, right? Like I do sometimes make assumptions. I make speculations, and I'm like, all right, well, this is what I think is going to happen. But I always try to make it clear I could be wrong. You know, I always try to like maintain some level of doubt, because you never really know what it is until we know. Like, that's just how it is in life across the board, right? So, you know, I think it's okay to take a stance, but I think I'm
a Zelda theorist.
Yeah,
I know
exactly
all about it. I'm probably going to be wrong about 90% of the stuff I've talked about Breath of the Wild 2.
But we talk about it because it's fun, right? That discussion, that speculation is fun. It's not necessarily because we're trying to get it. I mean, I try to get things right, you know, because that's cool, but we're going to get a lot of things wrong. That's just the nature of the beast.
Well, plus you're speculating on a fictional character or a fictional story or a sales number or stuff like that. But when you start dealing with real life problems, be it business or emotional problems, then it's better to just wait and not be so hasty with your judgments, because it's already happened too often where it turned, like we also saw it with Johnny Depp, where too many people, he already got dropped by all his brands before except Dior. He got dropped by every brand like before they even knew what the situation was. Just the mere possibility that he may have hit his wife was already enough. And it's like, that's not fair. Just, you can put it on hold maybe, or if it turns out it is right, you'll be the first to say like, all right, we're dropping him. But like you said, to your point, like you said, the mere what did you say before? Like, sorry, I lost my train of thought.
That's okay. But well, I didn't say this, but, you know, innocent till proven guilty is usually how I try to go by.
Yeah, exactly.
And
it's not fair in most cases.
Yeah, like I think rushing to conclusions is unfair if you don't know what's going to happen. It's just not fair. Now, I understand why companies may drop someone, because if someone's in a controversy, they may not want their brand to be associated with that. But I would counter that by saying, okay, well, then you're associating yourself with cancel culture, which, I mean, personally, I don't really believe. I think if someone does something wrong, they absolutely should, pay the price for that, right? But I think when we cancel people who didn't necessarily do anything wrong, or we don't know if they did something wrong yet, that's wrong. I don't think that's okay. I think that's, you don't know. Like, imagine punching someone who didn't actually do anything wrong, but someone else just said they did something wrong, right? So then you're just supporting the bad guy.
Yeah. And even if they are wrong, I'm usually very easy to say, like, all right, look, of course there are exceptions where the thing they've perpetrated is too serious, too big, unforgivable even.
Yeah.
That could be. But in most cases, like, even if it's someone like who makes, like, I don't know, a racist remark or something, I will always give people the benefit of the doubt to clarify, to learn from it, to better themselves, and to just be like, all right, I screwed up, and I no longer think that way now.
Yeah, and it can be an opportunity to learn on both sides too, right? Because if they do something that you think is like heinous or wrong, okay, but having that chance to learn where they're coming from, why they did what they did, it may offer you perspective that you didn't have before, right? And that can make us better people too. So, I think waiting in general is a good thing. Are there exceptions to the rule? Yes, if someone's life is at stake, that's different, right? But we're talking about, like, more, like social issues and things of that nature, or, someone getting paid for a video game and we're not sure how much they should have been paid. Like, that's a little different, right? Or like how a show should be written. Like, those are not as serious things, right? Yeah, absolutely. I just think in general, I mean, we just gotta shouldn't rush to judgments, as you said. We shouldn't make it just completely believe our initial assumption. We should be a little bit more patient.
Yeah, and especially because as human beings who, like you and me, we're on like we belong to the 99%, the normal people.
Yeah.
Like, it's very easy to see corporations and companies as one giant evil entity, while in reality it's just a very big collection of people just like us all working together. Sure, there's CEOs who get paid like millions and that kind of stuff I don't like about corporations in general. I don't like it about banks. I don't like it when it happens in government. I don't like it when it happens anywhere. Nobody should be able to take millions of dollars of bonuses while your workers are underpaid. But that's a whole nother story together.
Yeah.
But it's so easy for people to side with the underdog. In this case, one voice actress versus a whole company. And of course, people immediately choose the voice actress because she is an individual. She's the underdog.
You know what's something that bothers me? I never speak up on this because the moment I speak up on it, I become the subject of the meme. But you know that meme, and I think it uses like Simpsons imagery where I think there's a guy with a gun, and it has a character jumping in front of the gun, and then it says, like, it's like, okay, the guy jumping is like Nintendo fan or nerd or weeb, and it's
I saw one of those today.
They'll say like the gun person will be like valid criticism, and then the person in the back that's being saved is like Nintendo or whatever, right? So the implication is whenever someone offers valid criticism, so let's say someone like me who's a Nintendo fan will be like, hey, hold on a second. I don't think they should be judged so harshly. Someone posts that meme. Listen, bud, I have a valid criticism. Your opinion is moot. How dare you support a company? Like, that meme bothers me sometimes because for me, I just like trying to get down to the truth. And I think sometimes, right, just because I understand that, yes, Nintendo's a big company, right? Or there's different video game companies that sometimes they're bigger, and they're ultimately a corporation. They're trying to make money. It doesn't mean when they do something, it's all evil and we should just attack them. I think there's a reasoning behind what they do. Um,
Yeah.
and so I'm not always so quick to, to just completely critique them. Sometimes I think they're worth defense, and it goes both ways, though, right? I'm not always gonna agree with everything Nintendo does. I'll say because I'm a hardcore fan,
not.
I kind of have I do have a little bit of a rose-tinted lens. I do kind of look over some things, right? For example, online, right? Online's not amazing, right? It's better on other systems. But because I prefer to play games on Nintendo systems, I'm like, whatever, I'll just use Discord, I guess, right? Like, I still acknowledge it as an issue, but I don't complain about it unless the conversation comes up, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and 9 times out of 10, people who really go hardcore complaining and accuse you of defending a company, they usually don't know how business is run, how the business works, what a company actually does. They just see a big building with 2 angry eyes on it, like the big evil corporation.
Yeah.
And
I think that's a little lazy from like an intellectual perspective, right? Like, okay,
it's a very lazy mentality.
It's not black and white. Usually it's not.
Because like I said, I've worked for instance, the Coca-Cola company.
Yeah.
Do I support Coca-Cola? No, I don't even drink this stuff.
That's okay.
Like, I'm pretty sure if I found out what the CEO of Coca-Cola is making, I would probably be angry. But I will come to the defense of a specific job. For instance, as an example with Nintendo, we had that controversy back in the day where they were banning channels because they were streaming Age of Calamity early, before release.
Yeah.
People had hacked their switches, and they were, practically just shutting them all down one by one. They also made a couple of mistakes where they banned the wrong channels, which were in Australia and New Zealand, which the game was already out there.
Yeah.
And Nintendo just kind of forgot about that. But all the other channels, people started complaining, and they were like, yeah, the Nintendo is hammering down the fans again, and blah, 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 blah. And like, well, you cannot just start streaming a game that's not out yet and make money off that. There is a thing called embargoes for a reason,
Yeah.
That's to make sure that you cannot get a jump on the competition. And if you want to work with Nintendo and get early review copies and stuff, that takes years to win their trust and to show that you are a legit company, and
right.
that you build up credibility as a video game journalist, and at some point, hopefully,
my cat
Nintendo
missed the
will
table.
trust you.
You okay?
Oh.
She was like, she had a Lion King moment. How are you doing? You alrighty? That's alright. She's fine.
Long live the king.
In this case, the queen. It's alright. Get your butt off the camera.
But yeah, that's like the first thing I always do is I just try to find an example from my own experience in doing business. And if I make an animation for Coca-Cola of some sort of big campaign that they're running, but the campaign is not live yet, and I just upload that animation to my YouTube channel, obviously I'm gonna throw I'm jeopardizing the entire thing, which includes many cameramen and other animators and actors and who all worked on this promotion, and I'm completely throwing all these people under the bus. So in that case, I'm not defending Coca-Cola, I'm defending how business is done. And sometimes the business is right and the individual is not. It may seem like, the poor little streamer is getting shut down by a big company. Well, sometimes they are completely in their right to do so, because people were making they were getting like a lot of views.
Yeah,
because they were streaming a game that wasn't supposed to be out yet.
I remember that happened for I think Pokemon as well.
Yeah.
Or something similar, at least. Like it's kind of crazy. I remember thinking, man, this person got way more views I've gotten in like a year just by doing something illegal.
Yes,
good for
exactly.
them. But also, I knew that they were gonna they were going to lose it all, and they did because it's illegal. So and then it's very like interesting that there are people out there that will complain about getting banned when they did something illegal on a public streaming platform. It's like, hey, when you're if you're streaming a game that hasn't come out yet, and you're not actually, you didn't sign any contracts to be allowed to do that, guess what? You're openly broadcasting that you broke some sort of law. Like, what do you expect? Right.
Usually it's young kids doing that, and they don't think about the implications. Because, there's plenty of examples where I have sided with... Because something is technically illegal, but in my opinion, it shouldn't. Like the whole free melee stuff, I was a full supporter of that. I thought it was ridiculous that they were still banning, especially in a time when the pandemic was happening. They gave Super Smash Bros. Melee players an opportunity to play online, which was a fan effort, which means it was done using ROMs, and so Nintendo shut it down. But if you really saw how they did it, they were all using the legit discs. It was just modded. It was just a modded disc, but they've already paid for the game itself. It wasn't even emulated. It wasn't like a cloned ROM or anything like that.
Yeah, I think it's for Nintendo. They just kind of have a very blanket philosophy. It's like, oh, okay, that's not a sanctioned version of our game. We're not going to support it, right? We're gonna send out a cease and desist. Like I think they just have like a very blanket rule, just to like maximize protection of their IP.
They can be overly protective for sure, and they make mistakes.
It works to protect their IP, but it also, I think it does hurt. I mean, in a way, it protects their IP, but also it hurt it because, like, having an active Smash Bros. Community is a good thing, right? That only is more conversation about Nintendo. I do agree with you. I think that if Nintendo had more of a precise sort of action on how they handle that, I think it would be better. Like, I think it's kind of like how you mentioned how Nintendo blocked videos in other countries where it was legal to stream Age of Calamity for a few hours, right? And the reason that happened is because it's a very blanket response, right? Like, I'm not even sure it's a person behind it. It might just have like certain algorithms in place to detect certain things out there, and they're like, hey, that's out of there, right? Like, I think they need to have more of a dedicated team that's focused on assessing something and deciding if it's good or bad for the brand.
Yeah, because no human decision would have... any human would have seen... like, oh, this is New Zealand, different time zone. They already had the game for half a day.
And it's not just a Nintendo thing. That's a huge issue on YouTube in general. Sometimes companies just have
everything. Everything automated.
Yeah,
we're taking the human decision making. We keep diminishing that and taking it out of the system more and more.
It's kind of scary when you talk about the YouTube algorithm, because it's almost like taken on. It has its own identity. I don't know how in control YouTube is actually over the algorithm. It's kind of scary.
It can be. It can destroy and it can create. That's for sure. But like I said, it's with everything. Everything in life we do nowadays is all the human element has been taken out more and more and more because we like to automate things. It's also understandable. Like, back in the day, if you got pulled over by a cop for driving too fast, you had the opportunity to say, like, hey, my wife's pregnant and she's giving birth right now. I'm on my way there. Nowadays, a little camera takes a picture of your license plate and you just get a letter in the mail with the fine. And you have no more chance to explain it or whatever. Whereas that cop would have said, you know what, just go on.
Yeah.
You drive on, it's understandable.
There's more variables at hand that we can see.
Yeah, there's no more humans involved that can, based on emotions and contexts, change the decision. And that's the problem with YouTube too. It's all automated now, and you just get an age restriction for, sometimes you don't even know why. because it somehow detected something that wasn't good, that was harmful.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. But let's move on to the other half of this discussion. I don't think it'll take as long, but well, we'll see. And Don, whenever you have to leave, just let me know. But
Yeah. My voice is also getting trashed, but I can keep up for a little bit of Zelda, and then
yeah, that's cool.
then I'm gonna head off because I've been recording voiceovers. I've been talking a lot, and my voice is just it's starting to break up.
It's fallen. Yeah, no, I hear you. Sometimes like when I scream, I'm like, man, I really hurt my voice there. And then I wake up the next day and I'm like, oh, you know what? It's better than I thought. I think over the years of like doing different things, like my voice can handle a little bit more than it used to. But also I do remember when we did the live reaction for the reveal of well, at the time we just called it Breath of the Wild 2, but when they announced that they were developing Breath of the Wild 2.
Yeah.
The screaming I had for that reaction, that killed my voice for days. Because it was an immediate follow-up to Banjo-Kazooie coming to Smash Bros. 2, which I had like been like arguing and debating for like 2 straight years. And then it actually was like real, and they showed it off seemingly as a final big reveal, and they're like, oh no, there's one more thing, Zelda. Like my throat just died that day.
Well, that was a crazy E3.
Yeah, I think that was probably the most hype direct, like single direct. Yeah, I mean, I think 2017 had overall better stuff, but just in terms of like a single presentation of surprises, how they closed out, I think that E3 2019 was, if not the best one of them for sure.
Yeah, it was outstanding.
Yeah, I know the E3 2004 was also pretty good, because that had Resident Evil 4 for GameCube, that had Metroid Prime 2 for GameCube, and also had Twilight Princess. And what was cool about Twilight Princess is it was following up Wind Waker, which got a lot of flack back in the day, and we were kind of waiting for like a more realistic kind of Zelda, something more akin to Ocarina of Time, but for the GameCube era. And they showed off Twilight Princess in 2004, and that's back when they still had the live conferences with the audience. And you can hear
that presentation.
Yeah, you can hear their reaction, and everyone's like screaming and crying in joy. Like that's a cool moment.
I still get goosebumps whenever I see that one.
Yeah, it's super cool.
It's amazing.
So that one's definitely up there too. But
that can definitely do a number on your voice if you scream a lot. Screaming is one of the worst things to do.
I actually did it this weekend too, because I went out for my birthday. My birthday was this Saturday, and we I had dinner with my parents, and then afterwards I went out to a few different bars with some friends. But it was Halloween, so a lot of people were out and about, and I was like, and then one of my friends brought up, oh, what if we stop by this Halloween horror maze? And I'm like, oh, that's a really good idea. So we all went. There was like 8 of us, and they had me go in the front. And it was a lot of like dark pathways of very scary characters, like people running around. So I was in the front going into the darkness, and I'm a very dramatic person. I used to do theater as well, actually. So I just kind of went in there, and I was just screaming the entire time like I was being mauled. It was fun, and I really got into it. But definitely, I felt it in my voice for a little bit, but I woke up the next day, I was fine. Like to my point from earlier, I feel like over the years I've kind of built a bit of a tolerance. Now, granted, that was just a 15-minute maze. If it was a 30-minute maze, my voice probably would have been done for. But
a monster maze, if you will.
Yeah, a monster maze. That was
a real life
100% accurate. Yeah. Wow. There you go.
I think in my case, my voice has not improved in that regard, like in terms of stamina, but you just learn to know your own voice better.
Sure.
So whenever I feel like, oh, okay, I've reached that point where it's starting to break up too much, I will just stop recording a voiceover. I'll continue the next day. I cannot record a full script in one day. It's impossible for me. Like, maybe if I could do it flawless, I could. But because English is not my native language, I tend to stumble a lot.
You
I
know, I
tend
wouldn't notice.
to,
I wouldn't have been able to guess that. Like, you could have told me English was your first language. I would have believed that.
yeah, maybe someone who's native English, but like trips over their words a lot.
Mm, yeah.
But maybe I could get away with that. But you know, I really have to check out my pronunciation. I tend to either talk too fast or words just completely disappear, or so I just keep repeating the same sentences until I feel like there's a take there that's like flawless. I'm very hypercritical,
Sure.
which
Sure.
is good. Which is good for my content, but it's killing my voice. So
Yeah. I mean,
I've
how
had
long are you record? If let's say you're and I understand there's a lot of cuts and edits, right? But like, typical video that's like, let's say between 10 and 20 minutes, which is still a
uh,
large range. Like, how long is your recording time for that?
well, I uploaded a Halloween video today, and I recorded it on Friday and Saturday. So I did. It took me. That one happens to be 2 days. But I've also had days where either my voice is just not working correctly, or maybe because it can also be that I record and then I walk my dog and I end up talking with a neighbor for like an hour. That already chips away at
Right.
my voice. So I come home, I start recording again, and suddenly my voice sounds less smooth, and you hear it. You hear that difference.
Yeah.
Uh, and in my older videos, that was so much more pronounced because I didn't know that about my voice. So if you like go to a bit to my older videos, it sometimes still happens now, but and you click on the intro and you hear me talk, and then you skip right to the end, like the very end of the video, and you hear me going from to like you just hear that scraggly
That subtle difference is something you're more likely to notice, though, right? I bet most people probably don't pick up on it. I will tell you though, like sometimes when I record, if I do it in the morning, there's definitely a discernible difference versus my morning voice versus my evening voice or my afternoon voice. Like there are three different voices, right? Because morning voice,
Yeah.
I still have like that morning sort of lowness. Afternoon,
Yes.
that's probably more like how I probably sound day to day. Granted, when I'm on YouTube, like I think I speak subconsciously a little bit differently than I would like in person. But then evening probably would be close to about where it is in the afternoon. However, if I'm tired and I'm starting to lose my voice, because at the end of the day, then there'll be a little bit of a shift there as well. So
Yeah.
it does change for me too. But
And
I
you have
want to get to this
learn to
topic.
recognize it.
Uh,
Oh yeah, let's go
yeah.
to Zelda.
Yeah, I want to get to this topic before it gets too late. So the basic topic is kind of actually a follow-up to a video I put out on Saturday, just kind of talking about what changes does The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom need to start to feel like a proper sequel. And that may seem a little loaded, right? I'm not trying to say I think the game is going to be bad. It's not going to feel like a full-on game. They've been working this game for years. I do believe it's going to feel like a full-on game. But when we take a look at what we've seen so far, I think a legitimate argument can be made that we haven't seen that much new yet, and we haven't seen enough to feel like this is a full-on new, fresh Zelda. Especially considering that it's been in development longer than pretty much any other Zelda. You gotta wonder, what are they doing in Hyrule this time to make it feel fresh and new? So that's kind of the idea. Like, what changes do we need to see, and at what point are we like, okay, now this feels like a full-on, fresh new Zelda?
That's a very, very good topic to get into for sure, because that is a concern many people have. I don't have that concern that it's going to be too similar to Breath of the Wild necessarily, because I do know Zelda, and I know that Nintendo is, like their track record shows that, at least with Zelda, it shows that there's no need to worry, because every Zelda game slaps pretty much, especially every 3D Zelda slaps. So have they ever really disappointed us? Not really. Even Skyward Sword, you could say, well, that's the most controversial one. Even that one, most people enjoyed.
Every Zelda has had a ridiculous amount of work put into it. I think every Zelda does a great job of feeling like its own thing.
Yeah.
Like,
So
I can't think of two that are like, oh, well, they're basically the same game, so just pick one. Like, I don't... Yeah, every Zelda feels very, very different to me.
Well, that's why I'm not worried, but I do
Yeah.
understand why people are keeping their hype on a like keeping the lid on the hype a little bit still, because the last teaser, as awesome as it was to finally see the game again, especially as a
Yeah.
Zelda theorist, we've been living from like dry point to dry point in the
Yeah.
last few years since I started my channel. Um, but it just didn't. I feel it was even less. It showed even less than the second teaser, because at least the second teaser, like the first one was obviously just a reveal trailer, mostly story-based cutscenes, no gameplay at all. The second one was like, whoa, it's in the sky, and it's we see all these new abilities, and uh, like we saw the floating islands for the first time. We saw so many things. All of a sudden, we saw so many different things, especially in terms of gameplay, show up. But the third teaser actually showed less. We did not see a single new ability in this one. Remember the second teaser? You saw the fire coming out of the shield. You saw him like going through a ceiling, like phasing through a solid block of stone. We saw him
Yeah.
reversing that spike ball back in time. We saw so many cool things. We saw the skydiving. And in this one, what did we really see? We saw the reversal mechanic again, where he reverses like a piece of rock and rides it upwards. That's nothing new. We've already seen him. We know that ability exists. And we saw that weird like plane where he lands on
Yeah.
and just glides down. And that's about it. Like in terms of new abilities, new powers, new environments, we didn't really get to see much.
No, we
And
just
that's why
haven't. Yeah, we haven't.
yeah, and I think that's why people are kind of either worried or at the very least like have their reservations with the game as of now, because it wasn't the trailer, the Zelda trailer we needed to see what this game is going to be about. It was just another thing to hold us over yet again.
Yeah.
You know,
Um.
I think most of us expected a 2016 Breath of the Wild type of trailer where they first showed the climbing and all the. It was like 3.5 minutes long, and it really was a blowout. Like, this is gonna be Breath of the Wild, and this latest teaser didn't have that at all. It was just another. Here you go. You can all stop talking, stop begging us for updates again for the next year or half a year.
Yeah. We're getting close to we have a release date, we have a title. Like, you gotta think that they're gonna start that build up soon, you know.
Yeah.
You would think, right?
Do you think Game Awards? Do you have any faith in Game Awards, or are you like, well, they might as well just show it in the January Direct at that point?
Well, I mean, I think whatever they show off at the Game Awards is not going to be extended. It's going to be a small thing. Just because the way the Game Awards is, it has to be quick. Now, they could do a thing where there's going to be an extended trailer, right? You can check out afterwards. They've done that before. So maybe.
Or a gameplay demonstration. They've done that twice, I think.
Yeah. I think there's the two things I sort of see as like a decent chance of showing up the Game Awards that are kind of big from Nintendo. One is an update for Tears of the Kingdom, right? But another is maybe another trailer for the Mario movie.
Oh yeah.
And I think that's a really good spot to have that. So I could see them maybe opting to show the Mario movie as opposed to Zelda. But they also could do both. Like, it doesn't have to be just one. But
yeah,
I would say more likely just one. And if I had to guess which one more likely will be there, I'm going to say the Mario movie. Just because I think it's just kind of one of those things. Like, the Game Awards is the kind of place where I think a Mario movie trailer makes sense. Not that Zelda doesn't make sense there. I mean, I think they're both likely. I just think Mario movie is slightly more likely, just because I think they want to. It's more of a mainstream event. I think the Mario movie, seeing another trailer of that is gonna probably cause more of a stir, more of a discussion for that than seeing another Zelda trailer would be, right? Because if we see another Zelda trailer, it would be like the fourth one or 4.5 one, because we got like that 5-second clip when they announced the delay.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, but you know, we're gonna get news soon though, because the game comes out in May, right? So they have to start talking about it soon.
They really have to start showing stuff and get people hyped.
Yeah.
I think that statue was the first sign where I was like, okay, something's happening in the marketing department now. Like they're making statues.
Right, like that to me says that they got stuff ready. Like they know what they're gonna do. They're just sort of holding out on it. And
yeah, they've finalized certain designs. They probably already have all the voices and localization done.
Yeah.
If I had to guess.
So, you know, this is kind of going in a different direction, but you know, I do wonder if one of the reasons why they're being quiet, one, because they got to focus on what they have coming out now, but also two, because I speculate that, and I'm not committed to this idea, but I think it's something that makes sense, is that they're kind of like, you know, maybe saving this for new hardware.
Yeah.
I think next year is a good bet for new hardware too. I don't know what kind of new hardware per se, but some sort of improvement.
Yeah, like if you would have said this like a year ago, I would have been like, oh, shut up about Switch Pro already.
Yeah.
But you do keep hearing there is more and more of a sentiment, even now with Bayonetta 3.
Exactly.
Some of the reviews are already saying like, all right, now you really are starting to see the age of the Switch. It's starting to show its age, and it just cannot keep up anymore. They have to do something to bring it to the next level. And I'm sure Tears of the Kingdom won't necessarily be like, you will still be able to play the game on the base Switch, because if it could play Breath of the Wild, graphically it doesn't look all that different. But for something, it's like a bit like Wii U Switch version of Breath of the Wild, like that kind of difference. Just a little bit more polish to the Switch version.
Yeah.
So I guess you're right. I think it's time.
You know, I think we're just kind of at a point where games are not necessarily looking like that impressive.
Yeah.
No, obviously Switch isn't like
or are struggling.
or struggling, right? Like Bayonetta 3, you know, I was playing through, and this is where kind of, I guess I'll touch on some of my impressions. You know, I was playing through today, and you know, I'm into it, right? Like the narrative, right? The set pieces, like it's large, but you know, even within these moments, I notice, oh, you know, the resolution's kind of dropped a couple times, right? Like even like in Bayonetta, when you kind of like beat a sequence, it like sort of suspends, and you see like Bayonetta doing some sort of action shot, and they'll have like a scorecard shows up on the side. And when I look at that suspended sort of like frame of what Bayonetta was doing, I'm like, oh, that looks kind of blurry, right? Like not it doesn't look like an intentional blur, more like a pixely one, you know, like where it's not very sharp, and it's very noticeable. Or even like one of the early scenes, like you see a close up of the tree, and then some of the leaves are like flat 2D things, and it's like right there in front of you. And this may sound like nitpicking, but like from like a very like casual gamer's eyes perspective, right? Like not getting into all like the technical mumbo jumbo, like it's clear that there are things in this game that don't look amazing, right? And this is like a late Switch game title. It does look a lot better than the previous Bayonetta games, but well, at least Bayonetta 1. I need to play through Bayonetta 2. I'm working through Bayonetta 1, then 2, then I'll finish 3, even though I started it because I wanted to kind of, you know, talk about it. But it is clear that it's not perfect. It still looks great. I still think it looks great, but there are elements there that I'm like, you know, okay, that could be better. That could be better. It's clear that, you know, there's a lot more that they could do with better hardware. And then I look at Breath of the Wild.
They're just pushing the system to its absolute limits at this point.
Right.
Far beyond what it was intended to be.
Yeah, I mean, the Switch isn't even that much more powerful than the Wii U. It's just kind of like a more easy to use architecture and like a little bit less of a bottleneck with the CPU.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
I think I heard someone say yesterday, the the chip that's inside the Switch was already like a little bit getting towards the point where it was already a bit outdated
yeah,
when the Switch was brand new.
yeah. Now I remember in
Like it was already
2017, I felt like it was pretty good, right? Like I thought everything looked substantially better, noticeably better, I should say, than the Wii U. You know, when you
oh
and you
yeah.
look at it as a handheld system, it's like, oh, that's as a handheld, this is a beast of an upgrade, right? But as a home console, it's like, okay, this looks better than Wii U. That's pretty good. You know, getting to see some like legitimate like Nintendo games and like with like big open like, worlds like Zelda, obviously, and then also Mario Odyssey with its open sandbox stuff. And
Oh yeah.
Xenoblade also was a pretty impressive for its time, sort of. There's some cool stuff going on there. But to kind of
Oh
like
sure.
go back a little bit though, like when you take a look at Breath of the Wild, it's a beautiful game, but there's also a lot of things about it that are clear. It's clear that they could do more with better hardware, right? Like there's a lot of very basic textures. I think a lot of the colors are very subdued. There's a lot of fog and a great kind of like a grayness to the world, right? To kind of hide things in the background.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's because of the limited hardware. If the hardware was better, the world could be more vibrant. There would be less gray. There could be more like textures going on, things of that nature. They did a great job making Breath of the Wild pretty, but when you go back to it, still a pretty game. But there's definitely a lot of things about it. You're like, okay, that could be better. There's a lot of room for improvement. And while we look at say games like for PS5 and things, and we look at like there's the what was it, the Uncharted remaster versus the remake, and obviously one does look different than the other, but that it's almost like that remake didn't really need it as much as like a lot of Switch games kind of need like a better version. Like the diminishing returns remark applies more for like for PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. But when it comes to Switch, we're not at a diminishing returns. I think diminishing returns, not as much, because it's clear that
super chat, by the way.
Yes, Taker 610 with a super chat. Thank you very much, Taker. Taker says, "Hail Andres and Don. Could we get Prime 4, Mario, and Tears of the Kingdom all in 2023 along with new hardware? That would blow everybody away. Here's hoping." I'm gonna caution that hype just because I don't think Prime 4 is coming out next year. But I'll tell you this, I do think there's a good chance we can see Prime 4 next year. We can see the next big Mario, and obviously Tears of the Kingdom, and also hardware. Like I think we're gonna hear information about all four of those things next year. I believe that. I do.
Me too. Yeah. In fact, Mario I could see getting announced and released in the same year.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Because usually it doesn't take that long. It doesn't have that build up that Zelda has usually.
Yeah.
So I can see that. Zelda we already know is coming. And it could at least also, new hardware would explain why we haven't seen anything of Prime 4 since for such a
maybe
long
even
time.
the Metroid Prime remake as well.
Because remember, they did the same thing with the original Prime, because they purposely skipped Metroid for the N64 generation because the stuff that they had planned, the N64 just wasn't ready for that.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely way better on GameCube. Like, it would have been, it's such a different game.
Yeah, it was a great choice for them to wait. And maybe that's why maybe they literally saw how ugly the game would be on the base Switch back then, when the previous studio was working on it. And they were just like, we better wait for new hardware.
Maybe. Now that also raises the question though, does that mean we're not getting Prime 4 on Switch? You know?
That's a hard, yeah. Do you think there will be Pro exclusive games, or do you think they will always make sure they are compatible with both?
Well, at some point you got to move on, because the Switch came out in 2017, and as you noted earlier, it was or to some extent, arguably aged even at that time.
Yeah.
That's tough. I don't think they're gonna do a cold turkey thing like they usually do. I think there's gonna be a bit more of a transition. Although I'm not sure. Like, you know, I'm divided on it because we're waiting a good while, right? Like, if it comes out next year, which, by the way, not everyone agrees it's coming out next year, the new hardware. There's analysts actually predicting a 2024 release. I disagree with that. I think next year makes sense because I think we need it. But I don't know. It's tricky.
Give a lot of people a reason to, because Zelda is the perfect system seller.
It's kind of. Don't you think it's strange that it's coming out in May? Like, typically, like, if they're coming out with a big game, either they make sure it makes it by holiday or they go for the March release.
Yeah,
they're doing May.
Yeah, it's weird.
No, but what would make sense is they just want to get enough hardware ready for a launch, right?
I mean, Zelda games have been releasing in pretty much every month possible at this stage. We've had Zelda games release in February.
They've definitely gone away from the holiday release. You know, and I think COVID has something to do with that.
COVID, and I also just think they're being very perfectionist. Like, they want to make sure it's correct, and they did, I think Anuma even said specifically, we don't want crunch. So if March was just not doable because they're missing that little element, they were maybe missing that last oomph to really sell the game and really make it perfect. I don't know. Actually, we can talk for a little bit, like, we could talk a little bit longer about the actual gameplay aspects, because I want to talk about stuff like dungeons and stuff, you know?
Yeah, well, I mean, that was kind of like what I really want to focus on the topic. Sorry, I opened the door and now it's like the echo just feels ridiculous. I wanted to check with my cat because
it's fine.
Her little mishap.
I will.
But what were you gonna say?
I will take a very quick bathroom break for a couple minutes. Maybe it gives you an opportunity to, check out chat.
Yeah, I'll check out the chat. Yeah, for sure.
And we'll just get back and we'll talk about actual gameplay stuff.
Let's go for it. All right.
I'll be right back.
Cool. All right. So checking with the chat, I see here Ronnie Fazio added me. I think Prime 4 will be available on the Switch. It's one of the games that they announced for the Switch in the beginning. They have to have it on the Switch out of obligation. And that's kind of where I sort of stand with it as well. I think that there will be a little bit of a PR nightmare if Prime 4 ends up coming out on just the next Switch. And there's a few different angles to this conversation, though, right? And I kind of touched on it with Don, but to kind of dig a little deeper. On one hand, right, like, maybe the next system is a cold turkey Switch and there's no like cross compatibility. Okay, maybe, right? But also maybe not. And then on the other consideration is, well, to your point, Ronnie, like, they made that initial promise. What are the odds that it's just exclusive on the next system, right? So there's kind of like two considerations here. One, will the next system be cross-compatible with Switch? Will games kind of run on both systems? And then the other consideration is, if it's not cross-compatible, will they have, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, but if they whatever that is, will they have the gumption, I guess, to just put it out on the Switch 2 and skip Switch after promising Prime 4 for us? That is a consideration. But I think there's kind of two hoops that needs to be gone through for that to happen. So, I'm not too concerned about it. But also, I'll say that I probably will prefer to play it on Switch 2. I'm going to want this to look and play as great as it possibly can. I'm going to want the best experience for Prime 4. So that's what I'm going to play it on. And maybe that's what they're going to be kind of hoping for as well. Like, hey, look, this is the best version of the game. But another consideration here is that maybe it is so impressive that it's just not going to run well on Switch. Maybe so. Maybe they do have it exclusive for the Switch 2. But to kind of, I guess, mend the fences there so where fans aren't too upset, they do give Metroid Prime Remake. And that's why I also want I told Taker I don't think Prime 4 is coming out next year, because I believe Prime Remake is happening. I believe it's coming, and I think it has to come before Prime 4. So with it probably not coming out this year, I think next year is obviously the next best bet. And I don't think Prime Remake and Prime 4 are going to come out in the same year. From what I've heard of Prime Remake, and when I say from what I've heard, I'm not trying to imply I have inside sources on this. I'm just saying from what's been, the reports from the different insiders. It's a big deal. It's not just like a basic remaster. This is something that's had a lot of work done, and it's going to be an impressive looking game. It's gonna look great. It's gonna be a great looking, great running Switch game. I think they're gonna want to, really kind of showcase that and have it be a big deal for next year. They're gonna want it to be its own thing. I don't think it's gonna be like more of a smaller release where it can kind of take up the spotlight for a few months and then move on to Prime 4. I think it's gonna be something that will dominate the Metroid sort of fandom for that particular year. I think it's gonna be a bigger deal than Skyward Sword HD, and Skyward Sword HD was a Zelda release for its particular year. So, now when I say big deal, do I mean sales? That's up for debate. I think they could be competitive, but I just mean in terms of like grabbing like the attention of that fan base. So, I think ultimately Metroid fans are going to be satisfied. That there's a few different ways Nintendo can handle this, and I think they're going to be careful to navigate it. I think they're going to make sure that us Metroid fans are pleased. So that's where I ultimately stand. Big man, I hope they keep the dual use for the new Switch. I love the switching. I think that's got to stay. That's a big deal. Big man, you think the Zelda is being released for new hardware? Maybe. Yes, having hope. There has always been a pattern of Zelda being sold on new hardware. That is true. Real Gamer, I want to be wrong, but I don't think we'll be getting. You're saying okay? Sorry, chat did a jump on me. I want to be wrong, but I don't think we'll be getting new Switch hardware next year, mainly due to chip shortages.
I'm back, by the way.
Oh hey, yeah. So
continue your answers.
Cool. So I'm not gonna act like I have a full-on proper understanding. Excuse me, I'm about to sneeze. Okay, I'm not. It may still come. It may still come. It's like lingering, but it may very well be the case that there are chip shortages that could impact when the hardware is coming out. I don't know to what extent, but I'll say I remember during this year, earlier in the year, on one of the revenue reports, we saw that Nintendo put more money into was it like hardware preparations and research than, I'm kind of paraphrasing, but something to that effect, than any other year in history. Which suggests that they're amping up for some sort of hardware release. And if they were doing that, if they were already seeing reports of that, I think the numbers are actually from last year, but they were showing up this year. If they're doing that, that suggests that they are putting in the money. They are preparing for something. Now, the difference between 2023 and 2024 is a year, right? So it is still like a give or take. It could go either way. But I feel like we've been dealing with this semiconductor shortage for a while already. I feel like Nintendo definitely has probably found ways to kind of catch up. I mean, we're seeing, we are still seeing like hardware issues, but we're seeing that PS5s and stuff are starting to become a little bit more readily available. So I don't know. I think it's not enough for me to like disbelieve it that hardware can't come out next year, but it is definitely a consideration. Like the shortages could be why we don't get it next year. But I wouldn't be surprised if they found a way to get past that. The other thing I want to bring up though, is just that we've seen a pattern where every 2 years or so we see new hardware from Nintendo. And we saw for 2017 with the Switch, Switch Lite, and actually the more quiet version in 2019. So both of those, the OLED in 2021. So by 2023, even May, I would say, considering that OLED wasn't even like that significant of a release, I think they could come out with new hardware, and I think fans would be okay with that. But what were you going to say, Don?
The Switch also feels a little bit more in line with the DS in some ways to me.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're dealing with a hybrid now, like it's still half of the entire appeal is the handheld aspect of it.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's possible that because it's a different type of console, they could easily just look at how many iterations of the DS there were, and then we have the 3DS, and then we had they just kept going. So I feel like it's a lot easier for them because I remember, I don't know if it was the president of Nintendo saying something along the lines of they're having trouble figuring out what to do because the Switch is such a massive success. It's going to be hard to top that. And I guess they're having a bit of an issue getting the inspiration for what they should do for a next generation console.
Yeah.
And I'd say just keep building upon the Switch brand because it's such a good system.
Yeah.
And it has such an appeal, but it does have to go up in quality in terms of graphics, and it doesn't have to be anything crazy. I'm not expecting them I'm not expecting that they want to try to compete with Microsoft and Sony.
No,
that's not Nintendo.
No,
but
yeah.
At least make it so that games can they can be a little bit more presentable for the current age.
Yeah, I agree. It's not about competing with the other platforms per se. It's just about putting something together that looks good. I think it's that simple, and I think like games are starting to show their age, right? I mean, keep in mind there's also smartphones and tablets and things that and then you have like what's that the Steam Deck, right? Like there's other platforms out there, right? And while I don't think they're necessarily going to steal too much of the market share of what Nintendo has with the Switch, but over time, people are going to want something a little bit more, right? I think just it's as simple as this. We're Switch owners.
Mm-hmm.
If Switch 2 comes out and it's something that touts, hey, you can play your games at a higher frame rate with better battery life, and they're gonna look even better with a higher resolution and more things going on. That's a selling point right there. Like it doesn't even necessarily have to be any more complicated than that. It's just make a more powerful system to give people reason to want to buy it.
Yeah, and they don't have to drop support for the current base Switch altogether. Just look at how long they kept supporting the original Game Boy. Like the games were still being made for that during the GameCube era. That's the beauty of Nintendo's. That's why Nintendo has always been superior in terms of handheld. The games, it wasn't always about graphics.
Yeah.
But the Switch is a hybrid. It still has a significant portion of people who prefer to play in docked mode.
Yeah.
And those people you cannot leave, in an age where 4K is becoming more and more of a norm now. I'll
also say this. I like playing in portable mode, but sometimes I don't play in portable mode because I feel like I'm not getting the best experience of the game, right? Like I kind of want to enjoy it, And I've kind of like thought about getting an OLED because the OLED has a little bit of a bigger screen, and the kickstand is better, so I can kind of like just sort of set it and maybe pull up my Pro Controller and play, something like that. So I've thought about maybe getting an OLED, but I also realized, well, yeah, an OLED would be nice, but it's still just a 720p screen, and maybe that's fine. But ultimately, I think we're so close. I think we're getting close to the next Switch, right? Like
it's due, yeah.
Yeah, like if I buy an OLED now, I'll be like, oh damn it, I just had to wait 4 more months, So
Well, people have to understand that those types of models are usually for people who don't own a Switch yet at that stage. And
yeah,
uh, like I said, I'm sure they're not gonna throw the current base Switch owners under the bus completely. And I'm sure they're gonna keep trying to make as many games as possible, like compatible with both. If
yeah,
they do
it's not
bring
going
out
to
a
be a
new
cold
system.
turkey thing, all right? Where like let's play this hypothetical, and it could be wrong, right? But let's just make the assumption for this quick little topic here. Um, Come May 12th, I think that's when Tears of the Kingdom is coming out. When that game comes out, they will also release new hardware at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
That happens. That doesn't mean all of a sudden there will no longer be games coming out after May 12th on Switch. There's going to be games coming out after that point. Um,
Sure, yeah.
yeah, I now interestingly, we don't know about any other Nintendo games after May 12th. So hypothetically, they could do go cold turkey, right? Um, I
Plus, you
died.
have the indies. The indies are doing really well. Like
Yeah,
the Switch is an indie machine. It's
yeah.
crazy.
They could just keep it out on the market and just live off the games that already exist for a while, for sure. But I just
Yeah, and
don't think that's likely. Like they even did a smoother transition with the 3DS, right? Where the 3DS had games coming out beyond 2019. However, most of the games that came out on 3DS between 2017 and 2019 were just kind of remakes for the most part.
yeah,
So we may see a lot more of those come out for Switch, right? Like maybe like we've heard F-Zero GX rumored, Metroid Prime Remake is rumored, Wind Waker, Twilight Princess. So they might start putting more things out like that, and maybe start having other exclusives come out just for Switch too. I'm really not sure how they're going to handle the transition, but I have to imagine that base Switch won't be relevant forever, right?
it won't be
Yeah,
relevant forever, but I do think the support, like they're not gonna do a complete overhaul again, because right now they're still rolling out N64, the N64
right. They're not
library.
going to just abandon that next year or even the year after.
No, and in fact, I think the new hardware will just run on the same OS,
I agree.
and
Or
it will just be more
something
powerful.
similar to it at least. Like
Yeah,
it'll be compatible, right? Like my opinion, and I think you agree with me. Like our Nintendo player IDs, like those are going to the like it's gonna be the same on the next system. Like whatever Nintendo account you have, that Nintendo account is going to stay the same and will exist in the other system. I think what they need to do, and this is big if they do it. Every eShop release we currently own, every game we own on the eShop currently should transition over to the next system. As if
yes.
I were
Oh,
to
I
buy a Switch
fully
OLED, but it's a Switch
fully
2.
agree. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I fully agree. Because if there's one thing that's annoying is, which kind of started with the Wii, is that constant reset, where it's just, and we're starting from scratch all over again, and they're gonna drip feed the games once again, and that's just, it's not effective, and it's also kind of an insult to your customer base, because we keep buying the same games over and over and over again. Just have a system that can transition over to the next console, and you have this system in place with the Switch. And if they come up with a Switch Pro or Switch 2 or whatever they're going to call it, just make sure that's like all of that can just transition over, and similar OS or even the same. It's just that the system itself is more powerful and has more memory. And so you can still make games for the base Switch that can also run on the new Switch. But you're also going to have exclusives that just, that are too powerful or too graphically intensive for the base Switch.
Yeah.
Didn't they do something similar with the like the in-between model of the PS4?
Yeah, so
Yeah, like PS4 Pro or something, and
well, the PS4 Pro played all the same games as the PS4, but it would play better versions of them. But then
yeah,
even with PS5 came out, games are still coming out. There's some new games. There's still a PS4 version for like a couple years.
yeah,
So they may even do that where it's just like, yeah, so maybe 2023 Switch 2 comes out as we said, maybe in May with Zelda, and then for about 2 years, there will still be games coming up for Switch from Nintendo. But it'll be a transition. So maybe like the first year, every game comes out. But then that second year, maybe there's a few games that are exclusive. And then by that third year, it's phased out entirely.
Yeah, that seems like the best game plan for them.
Yeah, I agree. 100%. Especially if they transition over the Nintendo ID with the eShop. Like if they do that, that'll go a long ways. But let's...
And studios can make their own decisions for that. Like if they still want their
third-party stuff
to be...
Yeah.
They can choose like, we don't want our game to run on the base Switch because it's too much work to optimize it. Or they can say our game is not very graphically intensive, so we're gonna do both.
Yeah.
So, but I guess you want to transition to the Zelda gameplay stuff.
Yeah. I guess one other thing just to mention is, you know, if they do this though, right, and I think they need to because they want to kind of keep the Switch brand going healthily. They don't want to alienate their user base. But with this in mind, though, if there's a lot of games that still play on base Switch for a couple of years, they may want to focus even a little bit more on the hardware to make people want to buy this. This is like, for example, sometimes like what Nintendo used to do is that you buy the system for the games, but if they already Switch and they're getting the games, they may want to do something a little bit more with Switch 2 to kind of encourage people like, oh man, like I need to get Switch 2. Like this improves things, you know what I mean? So that's just something to keep in mind. Like, you know, they may go a little bit above and beyond this time, just because games may be cross compatible for a couple of years. So they may want to find other ways to encourage players to get the next system.
Yeah, and I'm sure they will.
Yeah, but yeah, let's go into coming back to the changes we could see that will make this feel more like a sequel, right? What do you think what do you think we haven't seen yet that they're gonna eventually show off that's going to make us feel like, whoa, this is something big and new that I'm excited for this game?
I think a lot of it is gonna come down to abilities and gameplay. Because if you read the patents or patents, I'm still not sure how you're supposed to pronounce it.
I say patents, but it may matter on like dialect. I don't know.
I think in the UK they say patents.
Okay.
But I just say patents. But if you read some of the scenarios they sketch in those patents, it's pretty crazy. Just the whole wall phasing mechanic alone can make it such a unique and crazy game where you're entering. You're just the way you navigate a space is going to be completely different. It's going to. I think it could possibly be a game changer. Something that other people are gonna, what the paraglider was for Breath of the Wild and the climbing, the free climbing where you could just climb everything, which, believe it or not, was quite novel. Even though now you have games like Genshin Impact doing the same thing, and there's many other games that have taken inspiration from it. But I think there's gonna be stuff in that game that's just gonna be a game changer again. I don't think it's necessarily gonna be the world itself. The floating islands concept, I think it's awesome, and I'm pretty sure there's going to be a lot of stuff that we haven't seen. Big dungeons, huge islands, or maybe even different provinces, maybe underwater mechanics. There's going to be plenty to explore. The only thing I'm just a bit puzzled about is just why even have the original overworld there still? Because
right, that's what gets me, because like it feels too similar, which is something that's unusual for Zelda games, because every other at least, I mean, I'm trying, even like probably 2D Zeldas as well, like they pretty much are always completely different. I guess our closest comparison we have to this situation is Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, and there were a lot of assets that were recycled. But they still went to an entirely different, still a new world, still new dungeons and areas.
Exactly.
And this game has had a far longer development cycle. granted, it's a much bigger game, right? Much bigger game, so it's a more of a taller task. But they are in the same world, and they are definitely reusing a lot of assets because that's what they're gonna do. So it just makes you wonder, like, how much are they going to change to make it feel fresh and new? And it's kind of it's interesting because I do have faith in the Zelda team. I think it's arguably the best development team in history.
Yeah,
And it's definitely up there at least. And
for sure.
I don't think they're just gonna give us the same world and play it again with some remixes, right? Like, even if the entire Sky Realm's completely different, even if the world there's other areas that are completely different, there's still a big chunk that is gonna be completely recycled. And while we have seen some changes, I don't think we've seen enough changes yet for us to make it feel like it's completely different. It's almost going to feel more like a DLC within that part. You know what I mean? Like, the sky is going to feel entirely new, but the land may feel like just Breath of the Wild expanded.
And the teaser definitely seems to hint in that direction, because people have already scrutinized every frame of the newest teaser, and I don't know, man. The overworld looks pretty much the same, except for maybe some glowing drawings here and there, and some parts are missing. But, like, obviously there have been games in the past where you can visit old areas from a previous title. GTA, you could go to Liberty City, for example. Like you could go to the city from GTA 3.
Or Pokemon Gold and Silver, we could go back to Kanto.
Yeah, exactly. But the world of Breath of the Wild was already so incredibly huge, so huge, in fact, that you could build a whole game around it. And now you have to add all this new stuff to it. And then I'm just asking myself, well, why not just take the whole game out of Hyrule and, or at least to a different part that we never discovered before? Or...
And what's interesting about that is that there's lore that supports that, right? The map of Zelda 2, huge, right? Like, I think the Hyrule we usually explore in most games is only like a quarter or an eighth of the whole map in Zelda 2. So there's lore out there that supports a far larger world of Hyrule. And when you look at Breath of the Wild, you can see islands and lands in the background. Like, you could just let us go there in the next game, right? Like, they can do that and it wouldn't be a stretch. And
at that point, you're just starting to wonder, is the overworld from Breath of the Wild, is it just there to provide solid footing for when you're not in the sky? Or is everything going to happen in the sky? Or are they going to completely repurpose it? Which, so far, it doesn't really show that. Even if there's dungeons on the surface, which I kind of like theorized in one of my videos.
I totally agree with that, right? Like, it just seems to scream that. Like, I feel like there's probably gonna, if not a fire temple, there's something inside. I think we're going inside Death Mountain. And I feel like that tornado might be a dungeon too. I don't know how, but somewhere in there,
But even then, it's still just going to be like, there's an entrance somewhere in the overworld we haven't seen yet before.
Because of maybe earthquakes revealing something, or in the case of Death Mountain, the lava's no longer there, so you can go in or something.
Well, we've already seen a cave entrance that wasn't there in Breath of the Wild, in that frame where he's reversing that rock.
Okay.
And he jumps on it and it reverses back into the sky. That's kind of how you get to some of the islands.
And there's a cave entrance in that footage.
There's a cave entrance, and people have found that exact location in Breath of the Wild, and it's just a wall. There is no cave there. So there's definitely things that are different, but is it enough to warrant the return of this massive world that we already had? Is it going to make like some people have said, like, is the game going to be too small? I'm actually worried it's going to be too big. There's going to be too much to do, and one of them is going to suffer from it, because the islands are not very big. They're cool, but so far from what we've seen, I think the biggest island we've been able to see is about the size of one province, let's say Farron or something.
If
But
even
that's
that,
still,
I don't even know about that. I mean, you've probably done more analysis on this, but like I haven't seen
you do
anything that
see
like
one
yeah.
island. Yeah, you do see one island hanging somewhere above the Farron province that is approximately it's a bit hard to see because it's, perspective. You don't know how far it is exactly, but it looks like it could be about, let's say, 2/3 of your average province.
Okay.
Uh,
You know it's
and Farron is not the biggest province, to be fair,
okay.
but still.
Um, so like let's take a look at like the Great Plateau, right? Like the Great Plateau is surrounded by like these like ruins, like this giant like castle wall. Like it almost looks like it was inserted into the ground. What's
Well, that's
interesting,
actually a very good example. Yeah, the Great Plateau.
like the Great Plateau, there could be maybe something else like the Great Plateau in the sky. And maybe
Yeah,
even the game even hints that the Great Plateau was at one time in the sky and it came down. And that's kind of how you explain why it's like this giant plateau that's kind of covered by these giant stone walls. Like it's
that would be
very
so
weird how
cool.
it's structured, right? So if we see a few areas like that are like the size of Pharaon and the Great Plateau up there, I'm all for that. I would love that. The Great Plateau is huge, like the Great
And
Plateau
for
is
a
so
starting
big.
area,
It's
yeah.
almost like a game. Like there are games that aren't as big as the Great Plateau,
Yeah.
which is crazy. But obviously those aren't huge games. But it's still pretty big. But
Especially for a starting area, if you compare
oh,
it to, like, say, Kokiri Forest from Ocarina of Time, it's like,
right. And I
holy
wouldn't even
crap.
call Kokiri like I never even felt like Kokiri was small. But
It didn't, at least not back then.
no, yeah, it feels smaller now by comparison. But even then, like it's just crazy. But a couple things that I kind of like want to address, or just kind of ask you about, like hypothetically, right? Let's say if you exclude the land, right, the initial Hyrule, the
Mhm.
world that we see, the new stuff that we see, do you think let's assume that world it adds up to an approximation, it's about as much new land to explore as we got with the initial Hyrule. So
Mhm.
basically there's Hyrule, as you alluded to earlier, right? We can kind of go back and explore, but there's so much new added, it's basically just added like a second Hyrule.
Yeah, yeah.
Like if that happens, even if that does happen, I still think it would be weird if we can just go back to Hyrule and there's minimal changes. Like I think they gotta. I'm expecting a lot of changes. Like I don't think. My opinion, I feel like we shouldn't play. You shouldn't see footage of Tears of the Kingdom and be able to confuse it with Breath of the Wild.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah,
I have too
exactly.
high of a standard on that, but that's kind of how I feel.
Well, that's what actually, when we first started talking about the possibility of floating islands, which was, by the way, before the second teaser for Breath of the Wild for Breath of the Wild 2 came out.
Yeah.
Remember that? You were talking about Lava Wings and stuff, and
Yeah. Yeah.
then I made a video about the whole concept like a few days before E3.
Yeah, we
Uh,
based that off of the Castle Rising, right? And just this
yeah,
need to explore more of an open air concept.
well, that was the idea. We both thought, well, because that was my first conclusion was, okay, if we're gonna have floating islands, there are probably gonna be pieces of Hyrule that are gonna rise up. But that doesn't seem to be the case. Like the castle just stays there in place.
Right, it doesn't go
And,
that
and
high.
yeah, and even if it does go up all the way at some point, like the rest of Hyrule still looks the exact same,
The only
except
thing
for
that's the
Korok
forest.
Forest.
Right.
Yeah, the forest looks different for sure, and the Deku Tree is gone, but like everything else we've seen is pretty much exactly the same, aside from maybe a new enemy base here and
Yeah.
a new little piece of ruin or.
I got a crazy idea for you.
Yeah. Let's hear it.
And it's one of those things where I feel like by saying it, it's kind of me maybe like overhyping, right? But
Mhm.
also, if they were to do what I'm about to suggest, it probably would be the thing that they would do that would make it would kind of answer our questions, right? Like, oh, okay, well, that now since they're doing that, this makes sense.
Well, you were right last time, so let's hear it.
Well, we'll see. I mean, we'll see. This, so you know how when we see that shot of Link taking that piece, that almost like a cube, like that piece of ruin from the surface to the sky.
Yeah, yeah, that's the one where you also see the cave, the
Okay.
new cave.
Yeah. Well, excluding the cave thing, excluding the time mechanic, and even that I forget the name of the enemy, but the bird thing.
Yeah.
Excluding all that stuff, there's another interesting takeaway I have from it that I literally like thought of as we were talking about this now. I think there's an implication there that if we're actually able to explore the world of Surface Hyrule, see ruins, see obstacles, and literally change what we're exploring. Like, so by, I think the act of taking that cube up might suggest that the world we explore changes as we move about it, right? So
Yeah.
maybe maybe that means we can destroy things or move things that aren't just like barrels and bokoblins and trees. Like, it could go to more structures that seem more of like a permanent fixture, aren't so permanent anymore. In other words, basically the surface world can be edited more than we could beforehand. Like, it's kind of like more of a world that we can destroy and build upon, you know, maybe almost like a little bit more Minecrafty.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Now, I'm not saying it's gonna be literally Minecraft where you can build whatever you want per se, but like maybe to an extent
You can change. Yeah, you can change the landscape a bit more
and
more influence.
And that can go into, for example, the different ruins and different towns. Maybe we can build on towns, expand on towns, and things like that. And that can raise a whole bunch of, like, you know, side quest things and give you a lot more things to do in the world. You know, maybe people just get lost just exploring Hyrule, building it and changing it. Like, and that would be crazy. Like, the amount of work that would go into that would be insane. But
yeah,
it would do it, right? It would, all of a sudden, there's more reason to explore the surface because you can kind of mess around with it and do different things with it. And it may seem the same at first, but in reality, we're changing so much about it.
Yeah, plus if it has a bit more of a linear story, some things can change as the story progresses, you know? Like,
Yeah.
that huge tornado or storm that we see may not manifest until like the halfway point of the game after something significant happens.
Oh, here's a crazy idea. Hear me out here. What if, as to your point, as a story like progresses or changes, like what if, for example, the water rises and it creates a Wind Waker situation where a lot of the world is submerged?
Oh yeah,
that'd be crazy.
It's a bit Skyward Sword-esque. Also,
because they had that one province
suddenly.
Yeah,
like the forest suddenly submerged later in the story.
Yeah, maybe it could almost be like a weather thing. Like, just like sometimes the ocean level can rise, so there will be parts of the map that can become submerged depending on circumstances.
Yeah, I do have to say I am quite like I said before, I'm a bit worried about the surface not having enough utilization. Like, it doesn't have the right to be there, but on the other hand, at the same time, I'm also a bit excited to see all the stuff that changed.
Yeah,
all the
me too.
Things that we've explored and are familiar with. Like, I want to see what Tarrytown has become in the time we've been gone, or whatever happened to.
It'd be cool if it's like a city with like skyscrapers.
For example. Yeah.
Something that fits within the context of like the fantasy medieval world, but you know.
But it is a unique opportunity that we haven't had in Zelda before, because every time it's just a self-contained story, and then it ends, and then the next game is going to be completely new Link most of the time, new Zelda, new NPCs. Hyrule has got either it doesn't take place in Hyrule, or Hyrule has, you know, completely changed beyond recognition, like Ocarina of Time to Twilight Princess, for example. And this is the first time where we actually get to revisit the same people and be like, hey, what have you been up to in the, I don't know, because there's probably a time jump in there somewhere, because
Yeah.
Zelda's hair is suddenly short, and
I liked in my head, I tell myself it's a 2-year gap, but we don't know. We don't know what it'll be. Maybe it's just a few months.
well, there was something about the sun being in a slightly different position than it was in Breath of the Wild, which could indicate that, like, the difference between summer and winter solstice. So it could also just be a half a year. Obviously, stuff has changed because the divine beasts are suddenly no longer there. The Sheikah towers are no longer there. That's not gonna suddenly disappear overnight. So they have been doing stuff to maybe rebuild the kingdom, or you know, there have been developments that we haven't seen.
Yeah, no, for sure. There's things we don't know about. I'm very curious about the Yiga, because we see I forget what Master Koga, right? He falls down the hole.
Yeah.
And we know the Yiga worship Ganon, and Ganondorf is deep underground. And Master Koga says, "This is not the last." I'm paraphrasing, but he says something to the effect of, "This is not the last you'll see of me," right? So makes me wonder, are the Yiga gonna tie into this? I mean, if Ganondorf is returning, hey, their Lord and Savior, or their, you know, whatever it is they worship, has come back to the living. So they're probably gonna be pretty excited about that, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like it's gonna be I don't know if it's gonna be a major plot point, but it's gonna be something. It's gonna be an element to the game. So that's a whole other thing, you know. What if there's like there's a whole bunch more Yiga now, and they live underground. I don't. There's a lot to this.
Role probably.
Yeah.
I doubt they're gonna repeat the same thing where they're just randomly hunting you across Hyrule and they just spawn wherever. I don't think they're gonna do that again.
Yeah.
So you know, I feel like there's probably gonna be a big change in that sense. Like all the factions have different roles now, and
I want to see Dark Nuts. Dark Nuts got to come back.
Well, that's definitely one thing that, like, to the title of your podcast today, like changes from Breath of the Wild to Tears of the Kingdom. Enemy variety needs to go way up.
Yeah,
because that was one of the biggest disappointments of Breath of the Wild, in my opinion. Way more so than the absence of dungeons, because at least, you know, the Divine Beasts were new. And it was something we have never seen before in a Zelda game, where you're manipulating this huge mechanical beast. Was it a good replacement for normal dungeons? No, but it was at least something new. But with the enemies, there were practically no new enemies, and the ones that were new were not really all too exciting. And like, once you've seen one province, once you've discovered one whole province, you've seen 90% of the enemies in the game, because every province had the same enemies. There were didn't matter how high up the mountains you were, or in the scorching desert, or in the rainforest, you're always gonna find moblins, bokoblins, lizopos, choo-choos, keys.
Yeah,
and that's about it. Yeah, like.
Yeah, there's a lot they can add on.
It was just weird to not have enemies that were more specific to one area. You know.
I'll say that it was cool to see like more wildlife. There's a focus more on wildlife, which is nice. And I hope they build on that, right? I feel like you can make the excuse that since the Calamity Ganon was repelled, we see more people show up. And we also see more wildlife show up, right? As Hyrule seemingly becomes more hospitable. Then obviously it changes once the game begins, right? But, you know, there could be an excuse to bring in more of that. But then also because Ganondorf does come back in the way he does, that's an excuse to, you know, maybe bring in more enemies as well, too, right? Maybe some of them are from underground because we see the different things happening there. And some of them are clearly from the sky. One enemy that we know is returning, well, okay, no. That may be returning is the Kargarok. So you know that one shot we talk about with Link lifting up the stone, right? That has the cave entrance apparently.
Oh yeah, the bat
The
bird.
bat
thingy.
bird thing is, I think it's a
Yeah.
Kargarok. And
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people say that's probably that
no,
because of the
it's
tail.
right. And it's weird because depending on which game you play, it's like, oh, okay, right. Like if you play Wind Waker, you're like, no, that doesn't look like a Kargarok has like all feathers, right? But the Kargarok in Twilight Princess looks more like dinosaur dragon like, which is how that thing looks in the footage for the trailer. So I feel like that might be kind of following up on that style. But anyways, point is that looks like a returning enemy, or it's at least just a new enemy type, if not a returning one. And we've
also seen that weird thing on the ceiling.
Right,
in the second teaser.
I don't know. It could be maybe the version of the. I forget what they were. Was it the? They're not the choo-choos, but the
Likes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It might be a like. It doesn't look like it sucks though, so that it seems different.
An upside down like.
Yeah. Could be a variant maybe. And then the new thing we see is that like golem thing. That's just entirely new. Or maybe it's not. It could be. Maybe it's like
that's an NPC probably.
You don't even think it's an enemy.
Yeah, I have a feeling because it has the green energy coursing through its main core.
Well,
I think it might be a thing that Link either can activate or it just runs on the same energy as the hand thingy. So I was envisioning something similar to the robots from Skyward Sword, the ones in the desert, you know.
Okay. I see what you're saying there.
I thought that was maybe the case.
Yeah, no, that's possible. My vibe wasn't that it was as friendly, but it's not necessarily evil either. What if it's kind of more like a guardian? The Guardians are seemingly evil, but they're not actually intended to be evil, right? They were just corrupted. They're actually from the Sheikah. So what if that creature is just like a Zonai creature, right? Like or a Zonai robot, right? And it's actually maybe what's the thing, like an Armos kind of. Maybe I think the best example that comes to mind for what I'm trying to describe, remember in the Wind Waker, the Tower of the Gods.
Yeah. I think I know what you mean. The enemies are more like a security system.
They're more like security systems. They're there to either protect or to test Link. Their job isn't per se. They're not just like they're not a force of Ganondorf. They're just a force of the gods that they're equipment. They're meant to test or protect. I think that's what it might be.
A bit similar to the guardians that you find, the mini guardians that you find in the
exactly
shrines.
Right.
Those are also not corrupted. They're just part of the test.
Yep. Yeah. Maybe something like that. It could go either way.
But yeah, enemy variety definitely needs to go up, and they have to be more tied to a certain ecosystem. Because it was just disappointing to be like, oh, there's green Lizalfos here, and then you go to the desert, and then it's like, oh, these ones are red. Woo!
It'd be really cool. What if they? I actually would love it if they were all the enemies were to return, but they expand on them. And we actually have already seen that a little bit with the Bokoblins on the, the Stone Talus forts. But what if they were to have like, and there was variety. There was like higher tiers for each enemy type. But what if they were to take it to another level? So you know how like in Xenoblade there are certain enemy types, but if you can find like a master or chief enemy type, what if like you could find a little bit of civilization for these different like enemies? Like what if like there is actually a place deeper into the mountains? So maybe if they do kind of go extend the boundaries a little bit, right? There's a new province that is more mountains, maybe more akin to kind of like the Death Mountain area where we saw Lynels initially in the initial Legend of Zelda, but that's where we see more Lynels. It's actually more like a Lynel community, and there's like a boss Lynel.
That would be cool, yeah.
Yeah, and you extend that to the other enemy types too, right? Like what if there's a master, whatever the master Hinox, and they kind of had a master, the sand boss. I forgot what it was called.
Oh yeah, you had the little sandworms, and you had the big one.
Right, the big one that I think was added for the DLC. Um, they could maybe,
The
they could explore
Molduga, you
more of
mean?
that. The what?
The Molduga.
Yes, the Molduga. And
Yeah.
I mean, I think it almost goes without saying, but they should definitely add like giant squids again. Like they should expand water gameplay. I would love it if they were to have like maybe there's even like the water goes out a little bit. There's a few more islands that maybe there's like a pirate community or something.
Well, that's
Yeah,
also when you get to that point where, like, okay, they're using the original surface again. That's a bit weird. But then when you start adding all that stuff up, suddenly you can dive underwater. So there's going to be underwater exploration. We've seen new cave entrances, and the first teaser was
yeah.
mostly in an underground setting. So we might have stuff underground, and then we have the Sky Islands.
And
If you
there's an
start adding,
interactivity with all that, right? So there's like gameplay, links between the different sections that cause you to go back and forth.
yeah, yeah, and then suddenly the surface doesn't seem so bland anymore, and you're like, well, I can still visit the same towns and
But
talk
the
to
sounds will
people.
have changed too. Like I think it's an opportunity to add more towns or make the towns bigger.
Yeah, yeah. Another thing I think they should definitely improve upon that needs to change is the side quests. I think the side quests in Breath of the Wild were very very hit or miss. Most of them miss. The fact that I can count most of the memorable side quests on one hand is already enough for me. Like Tarrytown, Eventide, and
Yeah.
I'm already out of ideas.
I mean, I
Like,
want more Majora's Mask like situations where there's like a little bit like there's a story, for a side quest.
yeah, I'd rather have 10 amazing side quests like Witcher 3 level where you go like it's a whole rabbit hole you go down
Yeah.
to, and you connect to the characters that join you in that side quest or are related to that side quest, like you say in Majora's Mask with Anju and Cafe,
Yeah.
where in the end you really feel for these people because you've spent such a time unraveling this whole side quest with them. I'd rather have that than like 100 of these typical, oh, go get 30 bundles of wood, or go check out this thing for me,
I do
or
have an idea for that though. So I hear you, but I actually kind of want that to still be a part of it, but it's like not that important. But like, what if they were constructed in a way where it's almost like a dynamic system where there's almost like an endless level of side quests, but the side quests are more of like the basic kind, like, oh, fetch me this item or fetch me that. But they design it in a way where each town kind of communicates with other towns and characters. And it's just sort of like a continuous thing, like an economy system that goes beyond just buying stuff at the shop. Um, am I making sense? Like maybe like they have it so there are characters that have like sort of like general dialogues that apply to, hey, I'm looking for this today, right? Can you fetch that for me? And then you go fetch that from them. They give you money, right? Or maybe like there's different mini games that are kind of like cyclical. It basically, I'm just kind of getting at that there's a lot of like basic stuff that can kind of be done over to get rupees or tools or materials from different characters, and it just sort of simulates like kind of like a living breathing world where, oh yeah, there's people in this town that just need tasks to be done that are doing different things.
well,
And then
then wouldn't you prefer to have like, oh, we need to like, for instance, someone in Hateno Village says like, oh, Tarrytown needs a certain amount of materials,
yeah,
so we're gonna have to put a caravan together to transport that stuff there, but it's dangerous. Can you be our like our bodyguard for
that would be
on the
awesome.
way there?
That would be awesome.
That kind of stuff makes sense to me. That's
Yeah.
at that point I'm like, yeah, that is a thing that they would ask a hero to do, because they need safety and they need someone to take, and like on the way there stuff can happen, either scripted or unscripted stuff
Well,
can
this is
happen, and you have
interesting
to
because
step
they
in.
actually did a little bit of this already, though, right? Like, you know how in Breath of the Wild you could just see random people, and they may get attacked by bokoblins. You can save them, you know?
Yeah, they already have a setup for that,
They
so
just expand on it, right? So it's kind of it's like a side quest, but it's an unofficial side quest because you know you just get little things. So what if they just do more of that as kind of like the basic stuff, but it's expanded to a point where it really kind of gives you a lot to do. But then to your point,
yeah.
they also build on side quests that have more meaning, that have more story, that you know, or have a little bit more nuance to them, and that's
Well,
also there.
to me, it's more like it has to make sense for something to ask a guy like Link, a hero, to do. Because, like I said, escorting a caravan to protect them and to, maybe in some way establish a trade route between two cities, that kind of stuff is perfectly fine. And even though maybe the side quest itself doesn't have like a deeper story, that's fine. But
It brings value
what I
though, because
cannot
it's a
stand
permanent
in
change
open
where
world.
you start to actually see two towns exchanging materials.
Yeah, for instance. But like, if there's one thing I cannot stand in open world games, it's when you establish a whole world of people who are needy and have no initiative to do stuff on their own. If you're entering a town and some woman is just pacing back and forth and is like, "Yeah, I want to open my business, but I need 10 pieces of flint." I'm like, "Well, go into the mountains and get flint."
You
Like, your
lazy
entire
bum.
business
Yeah.
your entire business depends on it. Flint's not that hard to find. What am I? I'm not a like, I hate being the errand boy. I want to play as a hero, not as an errand boy, and that's one thing that a lot of open world games just get wrong, where the NPCs are just there to be needy, and they don't feel like real people. And it's much more effective if the world also kind of takes care of itself, uh, like out of your control, and you don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. You're a hero. You're asked to do heroic stuff that a regular NPC would not do, or would not dare to do, or could not do, because they
Yeah.
don't have the strength for that kind of stuff.
Yeah. You know, just kind of thinking more on it though, right? Like if we are returning to Hyrule, it is the perfect opportunity to kind of really fill it out with more meaningful side quests and also make it feel like more of a dynamic world, like to like kind of how I was also mentioning, like, you know, there's just different like natural events that are occurring that kind of make sense, and they kind of build on that. They make this feel like more of a living, breathing world. They build on that narrative that I think was a little bit limited in Breath of the Wild, though, right? Like, I think that's a huge opportunity for them. If it is a little bit more linear, probably be a little easier for them to do that.
It
And
was
then,
very limited, yeah.
yeah, but
Because the other towns
yeah,
didn't even acknowledge each other.
interesting point. Like, and that would be a nice development just to kind of see like connections between two different towns. Like, you know, what if the Gorons and Zoras have a feud, and maybe a side quest, a big side quest, is you solving that feud, and that has like its own arc, and it has, and there's a reward for it. I'm not sure. Maybe like there's like, you know, all of a sudden there's a trade route established between the Goron and the Zora, and this leads to a new equipment type that's it's like a fusion of both fire and water resistance. You know, that would be
Yeah.
cool. It wouldn't be like mandatory, but it would be a nice thing that you can go and do.
It would be nice to see these people either work together, or like I said, at least acknowledge each other. Like, why are there no fishing boats laying at the coast of Hateno, for example,
Right.
because Lurelin has fish. That's their main thing. They're fishermen. Why are they not selling them to the people of Hateno, and maybe vice versa?
Maybe because of pirates, and then that those pirates end up
Yeah.
being like a side tribe of the Gerudo, and then they kind of connect, right? That would be cool.
Because then you also kind of create a Lord of the Rings-esque world where, you know, towns have meaning to each other. If one town is under attack or have a huge issue, you can convince another town to go help them in some way. that that's just the kind of connection that I know for Breath of the Wild. It also kind of made sense a little bit because the world was very fragmented and broken after the Great
Yeah.
Calamity and stuff like that. The Zora were kind of isolating themselves on purpose. They didn't want to have anything to do with the Hylians anymore. They were still salty about the whole Mipha dying thing.
Yeah.
So in Breath of the Wild, I guess they could still get away with it. But for Tears of the Kingdom, if it really has been like 1 or 2 years since then, I want to see some initiative. I don't want to see the same ruins and nobody has ever even thought about, fixing it up. Or like, why is the defensive wall at Fort Hateno, why is that not, like nobody's even guarding it?
Yeah.
Like,
there's
not been refurbished.
right. Like, what are they protecting? Nothing. Like they should.
Yeah.
There's honestly a lot of things that they can do. We can go on. Something I do want to mention though that I didn't mention in my video, because it's one of those things like I could have made like a 2 hour long video, on changes they could do. But heck, you could even it could even be a series.
Easily, yeah.
Yeah. But one other thing is like combat, right? And I think combat's kind of like an assumed thing. Like when you play a sequel, you're like, oh, well, I can do this now, right? For example, in Majora's Mask, because especially since it was a direct sequel, like the opening segment, like you're moving around with Link, and then you do a few jumps, all of a sudden you're doing like these forward flips and somersaults. Like, whoa, Link has way cooler moves now. I think they need to do that this time around too. Like, I think that the combat, while it was advanced in a way when you took advantage of your environment, for individual weapon sets, they were kind of basic. I feel like they should try and expand upon that a little bit. And at least from the patents, we know that they definitely are expanding upon like interactions you can do in the air, which is huge.
Aerial combat, yeah.
Yeah. But I'm hoping they kind of build upon just combat in general. And there's more techniques, more moves. They kind of can maybe combo into each other as well.
That would be very cool. Yeah, I want to see a little bit more swordplay.
Yeah.
Twilight Princess had a pretty extensive moveset.
It was a solid system. One. Yeah, because you had the 7 like secret techniques. My only issue with Twilight Princess is the game was so easy. You just didn't really have an opportunity to really like fully utilize the moveset. I
think the hardest part of Twilight Princess is probably the Cave of Ordeals and the Cave of Shadows, which is just this endless gauntlet of enemies.
It also felt a little repetitive to me.
Yeah, but like in terms of difficulty, like that was actually difficult because suddenly you didn't get any hearts anymore.
Right.
That's just I've been playing Skyward Sword in hero mode, and it immediately makes the game much more enjoyable for me because now when I'm in a dungeon, I actually feel like I'm on my toes, and I have to
there's some
play
threat
to my best of to the best of my abilities. Whereas in Twilight Princess, I could just run through every room, just hack and slash my way through, because nothing does more than a heart of damage, and it's the combat system is very lenient.
I beat Twilight Princess with 3 hearts.
Yeah, it's easy.
Yeah.
It's
and I don't like having to force myself to make the game easy, right? Like, I feel like if I see a heart container, I don't want to ignore it. Like, I don't want to do that. I have to create like some sort of headcanon in my head. It's like, oh, if I take the heart, I'm just taking the soul of that enemy, and I don't want that to be a part of me. Like some sort of like nonsense. Just for to like
a smart way to do it.
Yeah, but otherwise it's just kind of like, it's just I want to take that, but if I take that, it makes the world easier. Now they could have a system in place where like, I mean, they do in Breath of the Wild where you can exchange your heart containers for like stamina or something. But
yeah.
I mean, Breath of the Wild wasn't a cakewalk. So I think that I'm not really worried about difficulty per se. I just hope they kind of continue that, right? I hope they give us, it's constructed in a way where, it's challenging for most people, but not unbeatable. And then for those who seek the extra challenge, they can find it, right? Like how I mentioned, the Lionels, they added that for the people who want the extra challenge, where they go to the next level, right? Where there is the Lionels, but then there's Lionel territory where it's even crazier, you know. Um,
Yeah.
and master mode, maybe have master mode from the beginning, and maybe make master mode a little different. My problem with master mode was that it kind of got boring, just like hitting enemies forever.
Yeah, the bullet sponge technique, that's the cheapest
I need
way
more
of doing it.
variety. Like,
Yeah.
either A, because Link can do more, or B, because the enemies react differently. Like their AI changes. They have different like movement attacks with a higher difficulty, not just taking more damage and dealing more damage. So
Yeah.
I do
'Cause that's
think that the
boring.
Lionels had a little bit of that. Like they had different classes and they had different like attack sets. I hope that if there's a
Yeah,
master mode, they actually kind of like have new moves that make them harder to deal with, as opposed to just making them sponges of damage.
yeah. I like the best type of challenge is usually when you actually feel like the enemy is unpredictable and not when it's just it's a war of attrition and you just have to keep wailing on it. By the way, terrible decision in a game with weapon durability like the
Yeah,
one Breath of the Wild had. You
it's just
can
frustrating.
literally waste an entire inventory of weapons on one enemy in master mode because they
Yeah,
keep regenerating too. You have to
yeah. If you don't kill them
keep
fast
going.
enough, you're just wasting all your resources.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
No,
I had fun
I
with the combat,
yeah.
but
What I was gonna say, just that, like, I love the idea of there being enemies in the game where they're so challenging that it requires a huge investment from you in terms of resources. Like, I'm okay with that, but because
mm,
it's ridiculous and you have to like kind of go all out on it, right? Not because it's like just a giant damage sponge that's, to your point, like a war of attrition.
yeah,
That's
that's
just a
not
little
difficult.
boring.
That's just tedious.
Right. And that's a good distinction. Make it difficult without it being tedious.
Yeah,
That's the key.
yeah. Because that's of course I'm a bit spoiled by Elden Ring now because
Yeah.
Elden Ring's combat is really awesome and obviously they're not gonna copy that to Zelda because
I mean, they could learn from it.
they could at least learn from it because even the most
I mean,
basic foot soldier
mhm.
that you've already killed a million times can still knock you on your feet and just subtly kill you if you're just impatient or you just run around hack
Yeah.
and slashing. That's not going to work because you have to keep an eye on it. That's also one thing that the stamina meter was very unforgiving when it came to traversing the land, but when it came to actual combat, like normal sword swings don't do much.
No.
I don't think they take away any stamina.
No. Now
So you never
maybe
have to
there could be a
manage.
basic sword attack like that, but maybe they could have attacks that use your stamina but they also do more damage and they create more situations that could be cool.
I mean, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't Skyward Sword have that? Where if you just flail around like crazy, you didn't get rewarded for that because it takes away stamina and the
Yeah.
enemy will just block you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the spin attacks would waste your stamina. You could
Oh
do
yeah,
horizontal and vertical spin attacks.
and in in I think yeah, Twilight Princess, you can just spam it as much as you want, and it goes through every defense
Yeah, you
almost.
just kind of slice through everything.
It's so easy. Even if you don't have any hidden skills, Twilight Princess is still a cakewalk.
That's interesting that just thinking about Dark Souls, like there's a stamina meter not just for running but for attacking. Now granted, Link is way more mobile
Mm.
than an not Elder Scrolls, but
Also,
a
shielding,
Souls
by the way,
character.
blocking also takes away stamina.
Yeah, it does.
That's the beauty of that combat system is that you have to pick your moments. You cannot just hold up your shield and just take it and just wait for them to get tired or until they reveal their typical opening. You have to constantly pick out your moment. When am I gonna go on the offense? When I'm gonna go on the defense? When I'm gonna start stepping back to heal? That's also one thing that Breath of the Wild needs to change. The fact that you can you stuff your entire mouth full of food while in the pause menu, that just defeats the entire purpose of the difficulty
Yeah,
at some point.
it's different. And it rewards those who are hunting for resources. So I'm not necessarily arguing against that, but
The cooking was
yeah.
fine. I just think it should be real time.
Oh, yeah.
Just not able to eat from the pause menu, and maybe the animation for eating takes a little moment to do. So you cannot just pause blah, 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 and you're completely back on your feet again. And because
I think in Skyward Sword you could like take potions in real time. Like you could run while drinking, so you wouldn't stop. Like in previous Zelda games, you would click it and then everything stops while you drink the potion, right? But in Skyward Sword, you just
space-time continuum.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, it happens in real time, but you can move, but also you can get hit. Now it would be tricky to kind of navigate like how you pick what foods you want to eat without being paused, but or maybe it's just a matter of you can load it up while maybe you can pick the foods while paused, right? But you have to eat it in real time. Yeah, maybe that. Like maybe you can just load it so you're holding it,
no problem.
and you eat. You press the button to eat it. Like kind of like when you pick an item to hold, right? Like you pick items to hold in Breath of the Wild, but once you unpause, you're holding the items in real time. So they could do the same thing for eating. It's just you have the food ready to eat, but you have to eat it in real time.
Either that, or you have to have like a quick access pouch, again, like in Skyward Sword, where you just have a couple of
or both
pre-select items. Yeah, or both. But everything that was what made Breath of the Wild's difficulty such a weird. It had such a weird balance. In the beginning, most people died a lot because you don't know how the game works yet, and you don't know all the exploits. But once you start figuring out,
and also getting better equipment.
Yeah, at some point you just know, okay, that's where the good stuff grows, like durians. If I put 5 of them together, I get like max hearts plus all the yellow hearts. Even if you have low heart count in total, you still get like 20 yellow hearts in total. So at some point you just know how to do all that stuff, and you can just keep cooking meal upon meal upon meal, and you just have an entire inventory full of hearty food.
Yeah.
And at that stage you're invincible because you can never get killed. You can never get one shot from full hearts.
No.
So and that does not count yellow hearts. So you will never be one shot by anything, practically.
Now I'll say that something to you, we brought it up how like in the beginning of Breath of the Wild things are scary, but as you progress it gets pretty easy.
Yeah.
I want them, and I loved how I think Breath of the Wild is almost at its best in the beginning of the game because everything feels daunting and scary and unknown. It's a wild world, right? Yeah. I would love it if they could find a way to kind of do that in Tears of the Kingdom. And I imagine that they may find a way to make you feel that way again in the beginning. But I would love it if they could find ways for it to happen repeatedly throughout the game. Like maybe there's resets. Like we kind of talked about it earlier. And maybe the world can change as you progress. And when you progress, maybe different things can happen that can cause more problems, right? Like maybe it's not like the same the entire time. Maybe enemies get harder. Maybe new enemy types surface to create a new challenge that you now have to relearn how to handle. Like I love like being terrified of the Guardians, being chased by the Guardians. That's cool, right? Seeing this Lino that seems impossible to beat, once you beat them, I beat them. Like I want there to, throughout the entire experience, there's still being that threat.
Yeah.
So that would, how they do that exactly, I mean, I think maybe in certain sections things become easy, but others they don't. But it would be interesting to see a better balance.
Like all the stuff we've talked about so far, it's all connected and it all contributes to whether or not a game can continue to keep you engaged in terms of combat or not.
Yeah.
Like the enemy variety is also a part of that, because once you've encountered every enemy there is to find, you're not going to be surprised anymore. Whereas
Yeah.
some games, you keep discovering new enemies, and you're like,
What do I
whoa,
do?
what the heck is that?
Right.
You don't know how to beat it yet. You don't know how its AI works. And like even Ocarina of Time kept introducing new enemies up until the very last dungeon. The Spirit Temple had
Yeah.
one or two enemies that were unique to that dungeon alone. In Breath of the Wild, you didn't really have that. Even the bosses were practically recycled, like the Phantom Ganons.
Well, that'd be a cool boss to bring back, Phantom Ganons. Oh, that makes so much sense too.
yeah,
Like as an overworld boss, or like a recurring enemy type. Something I want to bring up before we close things out. Kind of continue the combat side of things. I mean, it's all interconnected, as you said. They bring back Dark Nuts. I think that'll be interesting because all of a sudden, that's an enemy type that was about dueling. And what's interesting is, if you look at some of the previous Zelda games, like you look at Ocarina of Time, which I think they actually like looked at like samurai movies for to kind of like study how they engage with that combat system. And you look at Twilight Princess, which is also very clearly having a focus on dueling. And then you have the parry attack from Wind Waker. Breath of the Wild seems to have shied away from like the dueling mechanic. Like it's no longer, it doesn't really feel quite like a proper dueling sort of like combat mechanic. You know what I mean? Like kind of like Dark Souls feels that way. It'll be interesting to kind of go back to that a little bit, and it would be a great way to sort of like, you know, take advantage of the Dark Nuts, for example, which are all about the dueling, you know? It's just interesting that Dark Nuts are no longer in a 3D Zelda, and that they seem to kind of moved away a little bit from the combat's different in Breath of the Wild, you know? It feels, the sword combat, it's a little simpler.
Yeah. And maybe that was necessary to a certain extent because they did want to try to make you more like interact with the environment a bit more, which in previous Zelda games you didn't really do much. Like at most, just for the fun of it, you would pick up a rock or a box,
but it wouldn't do much.
Try to throw it on them, but that was about it, you know. So for Breath of the Wild, they really wanted to emphasize like, hey, you can set traps, so you can do this, and you can take like advantage of the physics in the game, and
I want them to still focus on that too, right? But I think what's cool is that what's fascinating about Breath of the Wild is you take a look at it, right? And there's these different systems in place, and the magic sort of starts to come together when they start to overlap, and there are outcomes that weren't predicted, right? I mean, there's so many different things people do with Breath of the Wild that were insane. Like kind of like how they were able to get Guardians to like fight with like High Noxus, for example, and the things that can happen there. But you already have all those systems in place with it already. But if you continue to stack upon that with more and more things, all that does is create more and more potential outcomes. Now, obviously, there's a lot of programming and testing to do as well, right? A lot more. It's exponential, but it creates a lot more possibilities.
Yeah, with the new green arm that he has now, I can see that transforming into all kinds of new abilities, weapons. Some of them for combat, some of them for traversal. Because, for instance, I don't really see how that part where he goes like through the ceiling, I don't really see that how that could work in combat. Seems more like it's going to be a puzzle solver, like a puzzle ability, which is normal because that's the kind of stuff you used to have in older Zelda games as well. Some items are puzzle items which you used to, like the spinner, for example, in Twilight Princess, didn't really have any combat utility, not much. You're not going to fight like your average enemy on the spinner. It was mostly to traverse things.
Yeah,
which is fine. So I can see all the stuff Link will be able to do with this new arm thingy.
The logo even implies that there might be a bit of like a Zonai sword, right? Like it's like maybe like because there's like that
like an energy part of it.
Yeah, but they might go like lightsaber on us.
That would be cool.
It'd be really cool, actually.
Like, the mask sword is so screwed up, the metal is completely melted and gone. we might as well replace it with like pure energy. We're gonna turn it into a.
Well, maybe
It
it's
will
like
still
the
have.
spirit of the sword, right? Like a spirit of the sword it just becomes the hilt of a lightsaber, which would just be really cool. I mean, they already had kind of lightsabers already with
The
the Guardian
Guardians.
swords.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the Guardian swords were practically lightsabers already.
those are my favorite weapons. They were so
That's
cool. I was always upset when I broke them.
well, yeah, the durability is not that great on those,
Yeah,
which is weird because it's energy. Come on,
yeah.
those should be the most durable
I
ones of
started
all
to
of
see
them.
them more like glass, just like
Yeah.
really powerful glass that looks that has like some sort of heat to it. But yeah, there's some cool stuff. I mean, man, if they had an energy sword, they could even like have like Link like use it like a lightsaber, like cut through stuff. Ooh,
Oh, that would be so cool.
that would be super cool. Like actually like burning, like burn cutting. You know, like it's not just a slicing; it's the heat as well that causes damage.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
would be fun.
that would be. I mean, I've played Jedi. What was
Fallen Order?
last game? Yeah, Fallen
Yeah.
Order. It already felt very good there. Just chopping droids in half.
That would be. Oh, I don't think they'll be able to do that.
By the way, I gotta go, man.
Yeah.
I really have to get to bed, or
I
else
was
I'm
about
never
to say.
gonna
I was
wake up.
about to say. I think it's about time we call it a night.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks for
Well,
coming
thanks
on, man.
for,
Yeah.
yeah, thanks for having me.
For sure.
Really awesome.
For sure.
It was a
Yeah.
bit of a spontaneous moment where we're like, oh, let's just try
Yeah.
it in.
For sure. I'm glad you came out, man. It was a great. It was great to have you on. Definitely added to the discussion here. Guys, make sure to check out Monster Maze. His channel is linked in the description below. I made sure to add it. So check him out. Thanks for watching, everyone. Leave a like, subscribe, it'd be appreciated. But we'll see y'all really soon. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, I'm closing out here, guys. Have a great night.